I wanted to try to have an idea on it for vision. It's just helpful to hear everyone's comments about each
Presentation.
the differences of opinion.
There are questions. I don't remember saying
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys ever want to? You want any sort of engagement? Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't really had it. We've been having. Yeah, it does sound like. Especially with. Same thing. Table. Put a number.
Hey, Katie, this is Matt. Okay, that's great, right, so then we're starting a little late this year, no problem.
Right now.
Okay. Oh, no, we're not.
Yes.
I've heard, action. In order to start. Right. Middle. Just go back to somebody. Yes. Yeah, no, most people.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not collaborating.
No, he's not coming.
Okay.
They are still working. All right.
No, I'm.
I don't really.
Yeah. Tyler, when do you need to leave? So then, yes. Okay, well,
All right, Abby, are we ready?
But yeah, you could start on.
You want me to start?
Or no.
All right, everybody, I think we've got almost everybody. Katie's on her way up. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So Abby,
Dan and Allison are gonna start in their own.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's really it's a great day. It's a fascinating day for me, the first meeting of this commission that we can, I guess, thank Senator Tarr in part for creating. It's taken us a while to stand this group up because anything that is created with governor's appointees takes a lot longer than sometimes you would imagine, but some of the delay was also, I guess, attributable to some of my own confusion about how a group like this would fit in to the larger scheme of what happens in these kind of deliberations relative to offshore wind and other bodies. And so I'm really glad we finally got it together. This is clearly an all-star cast around the table are people representing organizations that have a keen interest in the fishing industry. And I know you've been interviewed a lot already by Pat and his staff about your wishes, and I think we're all going to get a chance to kind of lay those out today, as a group. But I think it's going to be important on one hand to bring you all together and also bring state resources into this room. Agencies like Coastal Zone Management with Allison, or Mass Office of Business Development, or unemployment assistance. There's a lot of other things that I think the folks like Bruce and the other elected officials have to think about when they deal with the fate of the commercial fishing industry, that aren't just, what did the regulators do, or, and so I think there's going to be real value to bringing this group together and also drawing in other aspects of state government. I sometimes I'm on these Zoom calls and I'll get texts from individuals. What exactly does that agency do, and how are they involved with fishing? And so I think this group is going to help pull back the curtain and help explain all that, and allow you and us as a group to maybe in the end to be creating documents and visions, and that we need legislative support, but also other agency support. I've seen a lot in the last few years with like Mass Department of Agriculture, with their grants and with the food security, and things that we as regulators don't necessarily think about, but those are the things that some of the elected officials are thinking about. So I'm pretty excited about the meeting. Thank you for coming. Future meetings, we'll try to make them as convenient as possible, whether that be, I'm not a big fan of virtual meetings, but maybe other locations like Westboro is pretty popular, but I know it's not easy to get from Situate to Westboro, but
It's better
maybe
than
we
Boston.
Anything's better than
We'll take that. We'll take that.
Take the ferry in an Uber and I'm sure.
So anyway, so those are my opening remarks. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to, meeting repeatedly every few months, making an annual report to the legislature as required by the legislation, and kind of taking a larger look at what the commercial fishing industry needs are in the state.
Thanks, Dan. Hi all, Allison Bruzius, Coastal Zone Management, and I just want to join Dan and welcome you all. It's really exciting to be with you all here today, and excited to see the good work of this commission. I know Dan mentioned the surveys. Want to thank you for doing that early work with all of us. I know I was impressed at the breadth of topics and the opportunity we have here in this group to pull together a large number of topics that are really so intersecting and intertwined. So excited to be able to work with you to build the agenda of this commission and get to work. So I won't belabor it further than that, but welcome.
Allison, can I follow up and just
You can.
thank CBI
Yes.
for all of their
You should be.
upfront work, and so as the legislation requires the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, Environmental Affairs, to provide support for the commission. And so far, this has been in a small contract with CBI, and we'd love to continue that, because not only of all the great work that they do, they're good at it, but because they're also involved in a lot of other facilitation, they also have, I'm not going to say they're omniscient, but there's a level of knowledge about, like, for example, if somebody wants to, well, if somebody wants,
I know.
if somebody on the group wants to talk about offshore wind, and there's already a offshore wind working group scheduled, we might want to say pump the brakes, those members should probably attend that one. So I appreciate CBI's, multifaceted knowledge of sort of what's going on among all these different groups. So they are a unique institution for us right now. So thanks for that.
Well, I'll leave the omnipotence to Pat.
No, please
Omniscient.
Omniscience? Yes.
Knowing all,
don't. That's Kevin's
as
job.
opposed to the all powerful.
So hi, everyone, Abby Fulham with the Consensus Building Institute here with Pat Fields, facilitating the meeting today. It's nice to see you at the table. It's been a few months since we talked to you in those initial interviews, so glad we're here today. For our agenda, we're gonna start with a welcome and introductions. We're gonna start with commissioners at the table, and then we'll do a quick round of everyone in the room, so we know who's here. Then we're gonna talk about the purpose and intent of the commission and review some of the findings from the interviews that we did with you all. So the purpose and intent, Pat will review. I think you might also ask to hear from the senator who had a big role in that too. And then we will also want to share back what you said you want from this commission and where you think you could be most impactful. So that would be in those findings. Then obviously there are a lot of other groups that are tangential to this one that are overlapping in varying degrees. And so one of our goals of this commission is to make sure that it can leverage and accentuate what those other groups are doing and not duplicate that. So we're gonna have presentations from a few of those other related efforts to get like a high level update on what they're doing and what their current focuses are. You also have a handout that's a longer list of all of the related efforts that we've sent in reports. Then we're gonna try to spend about an hour talking through what topics you want to work on first. What's rising to the top is most important to spend time on, maybe in some subgroups before our next meeting, and what you think we can accomplish in 3 months, and then maybe by the end of 2025. So we really want to come out of this with the top topics for discussion and a bit of a roadmap of how we're going to get there. We'll continue to flesh that out to the next meeting where we want to be on that road today. And then we'll take public comment and wrap up. Okay, so for introductions, commissioners, I'll come to you in a minute. We're going to ask to hear your name, affiliation, and then just like your top one hope for this commission, what you want to get out of it. So you can take a second to think about it. But Senator, do you want to say hello or?
Sure. So I want to begin by thanking everyone who pulled this group together, and I want to thank them for their participation to get us to this point by filling out the surveys, providing information, and talking about your aspirations for a group like this. I do want to point out that this legislation was also very strongly supported by my colleague in the House, Representative Ferrante, who helped us to move this in the energy bill and the climate bill and through the conference committee. And it was also supported by the majority, in fact, everyone in the legislature in both branches. And that's reflected with the amount of support that the industry has in the legislature. The challenge oftentimes becomes, while there is a lot of support, there is not always enough good targeting about what we need to do. And so the goal was to be able to create a commission that would help us with that. And I do want to point out that the commission, the constituency of this commission was very much directed by the industry. We took lists directly from what people suggested to us about who should be at this table, and we incorporated them into the legislation. And so the genesis of this was very much grassroots, coming from the ground up. And originally, it was because of the threat that we face from wind farms and wind energy. Not that any of us are opposed to that, but the industry clearly identified habitat and other kinds of threats from the placement of the energy generating facilities. And so at that time, everyone said, okay, let's make sure that we have a fuller voice in the siting and permitting of those kind of facilities. And then it sort of grew. And what I like to think of is that part of what this group will do is what happens in the hallway at New England Fishery Management Council meetings, where stakeholders get together on a very impromptu basis and try to brainstorm and work out solutions, but it's very much an ad hoc kind of a thing. And my hope is that this can be a little bit more structured, number one. Number two, can give a little bit greater of a voice to the industry across the entire realm of state government. We certainly have a lot of respect and admiration and partnership with the Division of Marine Fisheries and Dan and his staff. We really appreciate being able to work with you, but we wanted to go a little bit beyond that silo and say, how do we look at everything state government could do to support the industry? And I cite as an example of that the effort that Roger's been leading to be able to go directly to consumers from the major producers in the Boston area. That's something that happened during COVID, but it's a very exciting project and it's been making great progress, but it doesn't necessarily touch DMF in the same way. And then obviously we also need to think about the working waterfront and our infrastructure, which touches on CZM and EOEEA. as well as maybe mass development and some other agencies. So the hope really is that this will be a way when folks get together, provide mutual support to each other, brainstorm about what we're facing in terms of challenges, and see how, as you mentioned, Abby, see how we can engage the full breadth of state government to respond to those needs and to those challenges. And from my perspective, it couldn't come at a better time because there are a lot of threats to our survival right now. And some of those are more easily addressed than others. The others being things like climate change, which is clearly affecting migratory patterns and reproduction and recruitment. But I'm not sure what we can do about that. But hopefully we can have those discussions at this kind of a table. So that was a very long hello, which I want to do. But anyway, just appreciate the fact that we're here and getting moving with this.
Thank you, Sid. Okay, why don't we now go around the table this way? So Gordon, I'm putting you on the spot to go first. So
Okay.
names, affiliation, and then like one hope for this commission.
Sure, thank you. Great to see everybody. Really happy to be here. Gordon Carr, I'm the Executive Director of the New Bedford Port Authority. Position I've been in for about 2.5 years after 7 or so years working at Massport, including working on the standing up with the Seafood Collaborative at the time. I think Dan said it when he was kicking this off. The horsepower around this table from an economic development perspective, and that's my background, right? Is incredibly strong. And what I'm hoping for this commission is that we become, as the senator said, that voice both within the administration and the legislature and outside on what impact this industry has throughout the state from job creation and economic growth. So that in the next economic development plan, there's a commercial fishing section, for example, like that one ask, right? That sort of thing, that we understand what the needs are of the industry, how much respect the industry has for what they do, and how carefully it is managed, but also what the needs are, both financial and otherwise, marketing, promotion, internally and externally, infrastructure. I'm doing some similar efforts at the federal level where fishing, I think, has been, as an industry, institutionally homeless for far too long. With NOAA being both the regulator and presumably the advocate of the industry. I have a policy brief that I'll send around everybody and then I'll stop. If you go on the USDA website, the first line says USDA's mission is to keep farmers and ranchers in business. There is no agency at the federal level or frankly the state level that says the same thing about commercial fishing. And that is really what I think this group can advocate for both locally and nationally. So a little bit more.
Thanks, Gordon.
I'm Kevin Stokesbury. I'm the Dean for the School for Marine Science and Technology at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. It's great to see everyone. My hope for the commission, first of all, is to connect with people and network and find out where the problems were, and then see how our scientists and students can help address them. And so looking forward to working with all of you.
Hi, everyone. Aubrey Church, Fisheries Policy Director with the Cape Cod Commercial Fisheries Alliance. For about 2 years. Prior was a research biologist at the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation. For me, I think that through the interview process, it was apparent to me that there are some overlaps between other groups and really wanting this group to stand out and bolster and make sure that the commercial fishing industry has a voice in all different aspects, offshore wind, but to me, I'm very interested in economic development, working waterfront infrastructure. I think that there are a lot of challenges that the industry faces. And when we're thinking about the future, whether it's 20, 40, 50, 60, we really want to make sure that we have a strong and thriving commercial fishing industry and that we know how to connect to legislators in that manner.
I'm Katie Almeida. I am a founder and board member of Rhoda. I also work for a seafood company out of Narragansett, Rhode Island, the town of, whose name is Squid. So I work for them. I'm a lifelong resident, hopefully forever, Massachusetts, my state. I sit here with the rest of you and hoping to come up with some solutions to reviving our ports, making sure they thrive, making sure our fisheries are sustainable, and to be able to keep this profession going. So important. We have, healthy resources when we work together and we, work towards that. And I think we have to keep working together, keeping the conversations going to make sure that we are thriving and our issues sustainable. Thanks. I'm Holly Emery and I work in the Office of Coastal Zone Management. And I'm here representing Secretary Tupper, the EEA designee environmental, energy and environmental affairs. And I just want to hear how EEA can help all of you.
With longtime fishmonger, legal, largest fish co. I'm here representing the Massachusetts Seafood Plan, which Senator Bruce Carr actually was very effective, helping establish during the pandemic. And this was an organization of fishermen, processors, distributors across the Commonwealth, advocating for their needs. So it's my hope this group, this commission, come together. Just be a strong advocate we need. In the past, I mean, it's sort of the way the fish industry has always been set up. It's always sort of been disparate a little bit. That's sort of the nature of business. Here's an opportunity.
Safathia Romeo Taken, Deputy Commissioner of Fish and Game. I'm here to educate myself more on all your organizations. I've been in the fishing industry for over 30 years, owned a fishing vessel, so I was in it when I was very young. And some of the changes are great, and some of the changes are the same thing that I left when it was Amendment 13. I think this group coming together with the diversity of different people and organizations, echoing what Roger was saying, it's a breath of fresh air, because if I needed something, instead of going individually, who's looking for who's what, any member of this, can you help me, what I can do, what, this way, it's like one email, somebody help me. I'm always doing Jackie, L, Beth, this, and this to get it, and it's taking us days to, where maybe something would just take us a few minutes, if we just know which department we need to go for.
I'm Al Catone. I'm representing the Gloucester Fisheries Commission. I'm also a lifelong commercial fisherman. I guess my hope for this commission would be, with all the challenges facing the industry today, we can identify them and get out in front of them and be proactive instead of reactive, because it seems like a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today in fisheries is all reactionary, and we need to get out in front of a lot of it. Hopefully, this commission can do that.
Eric Hansen, current chairman of the board of the Fisheries Survival Fund, which is a group representing a large portion of the scallop vessel permit holders on the East Coast. So our membership ranges from Massachusetts down to Virginia, but there are quite a few from Massachusetts. I'm also founding member of Responsible Offshore Development Alliance and the New England Fisheries Management Council. And I serve on the Habitat Committee. So a lot of the things that discussed around this table will probably be applied at the council level. My vision for this group is to take this diverse group and all the input, get a unified voice. And I think that would be very powerful if we get a unified voice, because fishermen are not typically together. And I think this would be a good way to unify it.
Hi, I'm Tim Brady, Stellwagen Bank Charter Boat Association. We represent a lot of charter boats and head boats, hundreds of boats along the coast of Massachusetts. And some from north of us, some from south of us. I'm also on the Stellwagen Advisory Council and also on the Mass Fisheries Advisory Council. And I ran a charter boat business in Plymouth for 50 years. I'm a professor at Mass Maritime. And my whole resume, but I'm involved with a lot of stakeholders. And we have a lot of questions about what's happening out there. And I think there's a misunderstanding or misunderstanding from the general public that there's a lot going on out on the ocean. And I'm involved in all these different sectors. And this idea that, this is just like somehow this wild open land that we can do whatever we want with it's frustrating to fishermen. Of all different types, also frustrating to merchant mariners, to tanker people, to tugboats, to ferries. There's a lot going on out there, and I do appreciate the opportunity to sort of have all these stakeholders together and talk about this. Thank
You're busy.
I thought 2 hours from Marshall would be enough.
No. That's what
You weren't the only one.
So you're not alone.
Tell me about it. Well, 2.5 hours.
It was Wednesday night, right? Ed, do you want to introduce
Excuse me.
yourself? We passed over you. Do you want to introduce yourself or do you want Beth and I to go first?
Catches by.
So I'm Jackie Odell. I'm the executive director of the Northeast Seafood Coalition, and we are a membership organization that represents commercial fishermen who participate in the multi-species, otherwise known as groundfish fishery. I've been with the organization since almost its founding in 2003. And I am currently a member of the New England Fishery Management Council. And I sit on the groundfish, monkfish chair of whiting now, so also very involved in the various committees of the council. Just the vision for me, for this group, I don't know how many of you have had the time. Thank you for sending out the, Jared, for sending out the excerpt of the purpose of the Fisheries Commission as written within the legislation, but the legislation is huge. So this is kind of the state's vision for what moving forward with the advancement of offshore wind and clean energy from Commonwealth. Before Senator Tar and Representative Ferrante and a few others had an opportunity to look at it, it didn't have anything in it originally about fishing and the importance of fishing in the environment of advancing offshore wind. So thanks to them, we're all here today with all different expertise sitting around the table with a real opportunity to think about, visionary. What are we, and getting the Commonwealth to really, there's one section in this legislation that says the coexistence of wind and the fishing industry. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like for all of us? And how do we advise on that moving forward? So I really see this as being a group that is very different from all other groups and has an opportunity to really work closely with the governor's office, with Clean Energy Center and others to make sure that the interests of the fishing industry are front and center in what moves forward in energy and in our ocean space, our workspace. So thank you.
Beth Casoni, Executive Director of Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association. I know many of you, been the director for now 11 years, going on my 18th year with the organization, and a lot has changed. We have members from Canada to Cape May, and they fish primarily for lobster, but we do have mobile gear, gill nets, conch pots, fish pots, so we cover a breadth of fisheries. Our wish for this commission is infrastructure. Infrastructure seems to be the topic of conversation at most of the meetings we participate in. And it's not just the winches, it's not just fuel docks, it's access. If you talk to any young fisherman, the number one thing they say is the hardest is finding a place to put their boat. So access for young fishermen getting in the business, but it's also competing industries buying up bulkheads, buying up waterfronts in harbors that are no longer available for the commercial fishing industry. And one of our ultimate wishes is to have centrally located dumpsters. I mean, marine debris is in our top 5. So there's no place for fishermen or people doing ocean cleanup efforts to bring marine debris. There's one in Rockport, which is solely for Rockport. So if we can come up with a dumpster plan, that would be fantastic, and we could put out dumpster fires.
Do you want to go and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Ed Barrett, fisherman for about 47 years or so. I'm also the president of Massachusetts Fishermen's Partnership. I'm board of director of Massachusetts Seafood Collaborative. I serve on the Seaport Economic Development Council. I'm also on the Seafood Marketing Committee with Dan. Yeah, so I have 2 boats. I go lobstering and I have a drag. So covered a lot of fisheries in 47 years. I would kind of pile on what Beth said about infrastructure. I think that is it is the result of the past 25 and 30 years of diminishing returns for the fishing industry. You can start by losing days or losing catch, but eventually what you lose is the trucking, and eventually what you lose is the tie-up, and eventually what you have are you lose the market, and then you lose, again, kind of what people are saying, you lose young people getting into this business. And that's where we're at right now. Just for an example, in the town of Plymouth, where I've tied a drag route for since 2001, I have to make Rome 34 times next year so that American Cruise Line can bring in a cruise boat to tie up. I'm the one who has to move. So, you know, we're at a real, we're at a point in time where it's very critical for the Massachusetts fishing industry to be able to go forward. So hopefully we can make some progress in
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone. Just really quickly, wow, we have a very great, diverse, and extremely busy group of people. All of you are very involved in many groups and then having your own businesses and jobs and things like that. So thank you for being here. Definitely hearing a lot of interest in talking about economic development, ports, infrastructure, the future of the industry. Been thinking long term. Also, it seems like a key goal is just raising awareness among groups, among fisheries about the different agencies that are available to be a resource to each other and to others. And then to represent the industry in the state and beyond and keep it front and center in a lot of decision-making discussions. And then lastly, I cover just being a unified voice of a really diverse industry. So those are great. Okay, we're gonna do a really quick speed introduction round of folks in the room, just name and affiliation. Maybe we can start with Brad.
Brad Trommelmeyer, Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, and I'm the offshore wind fisheries specialist.
Good morning, I'm Tyler Silva, I'm the Assistant Director at CZM. Todd Callahan, Marine Scientist at CZM.
Bradley Morgan, the Division of Marine Fisheries and Huffington Industry.
Jared Silva, Division of Marine Fisheries Policy Analyst.
Story Reed, Deputy Director of the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Bob Glenn, Deputy Director, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Julia Logan, Administrative Director, Massachusetts Lobsmith Association.
Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Engler. I'm the Deputy Managing Director for Offshore Wind at the Clean Energy Center.
Hello, John Regan, Director of Policy and External Affairs at Bedford Port Authority. Also a member of the Vineyard Wind Fund Innovation Panel.
Hello, I'm Savannah Robbins here on behalf of the Cabral's office.
Hi everyone, Steve Tedeschi here on behalf of Representative's Office.
Matt McCormick, here for Representative Pronti.
Chris LaRue, Senator Monty Gonzalez.
Hi, I'm Will, I'm a person from.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, over to you.
All right, so we'll do this fast, so we'll catch up. So thanks everybody for bearing with traffic. The main reason we knew this was going to be dangerous. The reason we did do it is we thought we could get staff and some elected officials here successful. We're really delighted and staff are here today. So we will, in the future, try to find something that doesn't make Katie go crazy driving through traffic. So thank you, Katie. I don't know if we've got your copies. I'm not worried. Okay. All right, good. So again, I think as noted, we just want to, I'm going to go with kind of the purpose of the legislation, talk about what we've heard in the interviews, make this pretty quick so we can dive into planning our work together. So there are really kind of two parts to this, right, in legislation, and since the author is here, he can correct me at any time, is that, you know, it's really about developing, recommend strategies, methods, and tools to promote the sustainability of the Commonwealth's fishing industry, right, including, but essentially the whole range. And then secondly, and I think really tying to what Jackie said in her comments, is addressing the responsible development of these projects impact fisheries and figuring out maybe part of this commission's conversation broadly about economic development infrastructure is also how in the future, especially because there's kind of a slowdown or whatever you want to call it with offshore wind for now, how actually fishermen can have a more meaningful seat at the table here in the Commonwealth as we proceed, probably over many years. So we're applause right now. Okay, moving on. All right, so people said these are things we're reflecting back what we heard from, right? So one thing people said is what's important about this group is it's exclusive to commercial and charter fishermen, and we don't have to kind of compete with offshore wind developers or NGOs or anybody else at the table. This is the fishing industry's commission. And I think that was really important to people. There's a chance to really do some cross-cutting thinking across parts of government, as Senator Tar said, across different kinds of groups. We're going to have a little bit, just a quick rundown of some of the different groups that exist that are related to, just so we have a universe of that. And if we ever need to call them in to have a presentation, we can do that. Again, hopefully there's a chance to have a sphere of influence. And with this commission, you can really raise concerns and issues directly to the legislature, given that the legislature created you, as well as to the various parts of the state government as well. And then I think, as many of you said, is a really hope is how can we be visionary and forward-looking, come together. I think, as Al said, the industry's under so many threats so much, it's very hard not to just be reactive. But that's probably not going to lay out the path for the future of the industry that's going to be successful. So how do we get into that visionary mode? So those are the things that we heard from people. And again, here's a sphere of influence. I won't go through all this, but I think people wanted to say this group, we wanted to have impact and influence. We don't want to meet and talk and go home and nothing happens. So I think all of our tasks collectively is how do we actually translate this into action, which is going to be, I think, the ultimate measure of our success. Okay, principles people said is influence. In so much as there's awareness, coordination, efficiency across all these different groups that are kind of working on similar but different issues can be important. Transparency, obviously, it's very important, kind of good governance. And then again, this notion of efficiency. All these other groups, we'll give you a quick rundown. We sent out that short list of what everybody does. There's some overlap and there's some not overlap. And we can really talk about how we might want to reach into those groups if need be, or just directly say we're going to take you. All right. Okay, so I think what we heard is the commission certainly can synthesize feedback and understand issues that other groups are taking up, and that's important to kind of get a sense of that and where we coordinate and synergize. Great. Certainly the commission can act as liaisons to their constituents. And then again, it's really one thing that I think is interesting from DMF. There is a number of these, as you mentioned, there's a number of these kind of compensation funds that are already in place from some of the industry. And so maybe this commission could think a little bit about like, what's the framework for administering those? The state manages them. They all have their own kind of deal with each of the developer that was cut, but nonetheless, they need a framework for district funds. So this group could think about broadly that, and the individual funds would do. Okay. Again, I think what we've heard is, the commission we're not here to like wrestle with necessarily specific fishery management issues. There's lots of places to do that, and we don't have any power really. So we can certainly raise the impacts to economics or infrastructure, young fishermen, whatever, but it's not. There's a lot of other places to try to tackle that. It's, I think, you know, incredibly well. And that we're not going to focus on necessarily specific project issues, but weighing broadly across kind of policy. Though from time to time there might be a project to talk about. Right? So, okay. We were going to go through this a little bit. There was a ton of issues raised around economic development and diversification that people raised. So we're going to kind of see where you all want to focus in that regard, because there's a lot there. So we probably want to start with some things, not necessarily everything, but that'll be up to you. Another kind of topic that came up was, again, not surprising, next slide, is offshore wind. Part of the mission here, and any number of things, lessons learned, how this group can really help the fishing industry have a better seat at the table going forward with the state. Things about mitigating impacts, any number of things that could go on there. And we know we have work groups, that are administered. Dan and Allison work with those too. And so they're kind of really down in the weeds with projects and issues and the like. But this group maybe can lift up and think about any big things across that you all want to think about as we go forward. And then there was also a number of kind of regulatory and state policy issues. which is how do we make sure that fishing is actually well represented in all the various plans that the various state agencies, EPA, have been producing over the last few years. I think streamlining permitting processes, primarily for like infrastructure, is really important to people. I think it's important to like port infrastructure generally for a lot of the other marine industries that are concerned about that is how do we make sure we, do what we need to do to protect the things we need to through permitting, but not just be tied up in knots and paperwork for years to get anything done. Now that could be a big lift, but that's important to a lot of people. So I just want to note that could be something we talk about. Again, promoting innovation in sustainable fishing gear and technology as fisheries change because of climate change, because of offshore wind, because of whatever. Are there investments in such technology that would make sense for fishing gear and the like? Again, how do we improve the science of fisheries management? Now, that's a big topic. It's a big hot topic at the council, as you know. There's a lot of change going on at NOAA and NEMS, and so I'm not sure what we can do with that now, but people stated it. And then, continue to think about adaptive management as fisheries change, climate causes the different stocks to vary, maybe new fish showing up, how do we commercialize those, all those kinds of things. All right. Okay, and then again, I think people mentioned there could be additional perspectives we want to bring in. Clearly, senators and representatives, Lieutenant Governor, perhaps, given kind of her past history on ports and being from Salem. That we could have ex officio members or just speakers come in if you want to hear about whatever it might be. There's other agencies you can draw on from the Commonwealth, and hopefully with CZM and DMF, we can draw those in as needed, economic development, whatever else it might be. And, there's other perspectives. We're really focused on commercial fishing. If you want to talk about aquaculture, we could. There's some other things going on that are kind of interesting that, we can think about too, in terms of perspectives. All right, I want to do that. So that was kind of a quick view of what, the really rich conversation we have with all of you, and it doesn't really do justice to the nuance of us. Yeah.
So can I just ask a question? A lot of people around the table had mentioned the concern about port infrastructure, and I'm just curious. I'm more in the unfortunate world of fisheries management policy, so I don't get involved in the economic development as much as I wish I could, but we get consumed elsewhere. What is going on with the Massachusetts Seaport Economic Council, and is that a body that regularly addresses issues from an economic standpoint, seaport standpoint, helping larger ports, smaller ports around the Commonwealth be able to assist their fishing communities, and how does that? Okay, I don't even know who's in charge.
It's a great question. I must have planted it. We're actually at 11, we're gonna have we're gonna talk through a lot of the very related initiatives and activities, and SEC is one of those prime examples.
Okay.
Where we think actions or information from here could closely connect with the work of the Economic Council. So if you'll permit, we'll talk about it a little bit soon, and then we'll dig into those.
That was my only question.
Great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any other questions or reflections? All right, great. All right, let's, Abby, you're going to lead us through different folks giving us some great presentations.
We're going to hear from, let's see, the correct order. We're going to hear about the designated ports area review process. Then we're going to hear about the Oceans Advisory Commission, Ocean Science Advisory Council. Then we're going to hear about the Seaport Economic Council, as well as the Resilient Coast Initiative. And then we will hear about the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission and the, what have I missed? The seafood marketing. Thank you. We've asked people to put together a few slides, really saying like what they do and what their current focus is on, not like the full breadth of everything they've ever talked about. We want to give you a taste of each of these things because we think you might be curious, but not belabor it. It's going to take me a minute on the slides, but Tyler, if you want to introduce yourself again.
Sure, yeah. Good morning. Again, I'm Tyler Sola. I'm the Assistant Director at CZM. And thank you to the Commercial Fisheries Commission for inviting me to provide this update on the designated port area assessment. As many of you may know, to promote and protect water dependent industries, the Commonwealth has established 10 designated port areas which makes up approximately 2% of the state's coastline. And you can see where those 10 DPAs are up there. The purpose of the DPA program is to promote these water-dependent industries and to prevent the loss of areas that have key characteristics for water-dependent industrial uses, such as a navigable waterway, developed waterfront, backland space suitable for industrial operations, and supporting land-based infrastructure. Today's environmental and economic factors pose prohibitive challenges to intensive port development in new areas, effectively making DPAs a non-renewable resource for the Commonwealth. In the fall of 2023, CZM, in conjunction with DEP, started a DPA assessment, which is planning to conclude in July of this year. The goal of this assessment is to understand the strengths of the DPA program and the ongoing and emerging challenges, and develop recommendations to support the long-term effectiveness of the program and the success of the Commonwealth's existing and emerging maritime industry and blue economy. This process has involved extensive stakeholder outreach, including kickoff meetings, surveys, focus groups, listening sessions, and in-depth interviews. Many of the folks in this room have participated in that, which has been awesome. A geospatial and economic analysis, and reviewing existing data, research, and case studies. The assessment is focused on several categories, including infrastructure and land use, funding and financing, regulations, community impacts, coastal resilience, as well as the criteria contained within the recently passed Mass Leads Act. Most recently, 2 listening sessions were held on the Mass Lead Act criteria in February this year, and input and feedback from those meetings is being incorporated into the assessment. So draft recommendations are currently being developed with additional planned stakeholder outreach and reviewed for comment on those recommendations later this year.
Okay, do we want to do questions for Tyler? Because I know you have to leave for a meeting. So any questions about the GPA assessment? Yeah.
So I still don't, so what is special, what's special about being a designated port area? What does it get you as a town or a city or gas regulation or
Yeah, so these areas, like I mentioned, we understand that there's a limited area available for these uses. So they're designated as, waterfront industries focused on those areas. There are certain benefits in terms of dredging. DEP has a certain regulatory regime under Chapter 91 that they apply in those DPA areas. The main focus is sort of protecting and preserving this space for these industries that we know need that access to the water and these other attributes that maybe aren't found in other areas of the state. And if they're not protected, we've seen them, either through development, environmental factors disappear.
I think agree, go ahead.
Do these DPAs specify uses? Is it strictly commercial or is it recreational public access? Is it just straight access?
So there are certain uses that are allowed and not allowed in DPAs, all with that goal primarily being water dependent industrial uses, but that's not exclusive. There can be commercial uses that are allowed there.
So can I just jump in for a second? First of all, I want to thank the New Bedford delegation, which is very well represented here, for all of their support in getting us to this point and moving us forward. So thanks to the House and the Senate legislative delegation from New Bedford. So there's a quandary here. And this is one of the things that I'm hoping that this group can help us to work through. So the original idea for the DPAs was that an assessment was made of critical infrastructure in the various ports. And the fear was that without a protection, because of the high value of that waterfront property, it would be encroached by other uses that didn't support the working waterfront. The idea, the most common symbol is condos. Everyone's afraid that people are going to build condos on the working waterfront, and it would displace the commercial fishing industry and other commercial industrial uses. So the idea at the time was to put in place an overarching statewide protection. Some communities actually mirrored that statewide protection with their own local zoning ordinances to have kind of a belt and suspenders effect. So the idea was we're going to protect these from the threat of external investment and development not related to the purpose. And it was mentioned, the idea was these are irreplaceable. We're not making any more land. So what there is, and we have to protect it. The quandary is the same thing that gives the protection makes it hard to access capital. And that's because a lot of lending institutions say that because that property can only be used for these purposes, and if we had to foreclose, it's very limited in terms of its value outside of that bubble, then we're not going to provide the capital that you need. So as you had mentioned, Ed, one of the issues has been that with lower margins and lower amount of product moving over the wharf, there hasn't been the ability to invest in the maintenance of the wharf, just to use a very oversimplified example. And so one of the things that we in the legislature have been struggling with is how do we say that the DPAs come with protection and they come with resources? Because the market has not been good at supplying the second part of that equation. The difficulty is it depends on where you are. So if you're with my good friend Gordon and you're in New Bedford, a lot of the waterfront infrastructure is publicly owned. And so trying to channel the resources to those publicly owned properties brings one set of challenges. But if you're in Gloucester, as you know, because we love to have you as a visitor.
And I love to get.
Yeah. So you know that most of the infrastructure, with the exception of the Jodrey State Fish Pier, is privately owned. And that comes with a separate set of challenges of trying to get resources that oftentimes are public in nature into private property. And the failure of our ability to do that thus far, and we have created several legislative vehicles to do it, but the legal impediment of the interaction between public dollars and private property has thwarted us every time thus far. So the result of that is we have piers and wharves that aren't maintained. We've had a couple of high-profile ones that have fallen into the harbors that they're in. And it presents a significant threat to the future. And that's, I think, a great discussion for this group, along with Allison, because she's been great at listening and understanding this. I think we also need, if we were going to invite another group, and I referenced this earlier, Mass Development, which has an interest in this, but hasn't been able to find the path. None of us have. So that's the duality to the situation. We've got protection, but without resources, what is being protected will wither, and it is withering. And that was a very long-winded answer, but you expected that anyway.
That was wonderfully said, Senator. Thank you. And I think part of the assessment that Tyler was talking about is us in real time struggling with how do we take a strong look at the program and come up with some creative solutions to that primary problem and a number of others that we realize are part of that ecosystem. So I think that's a potentially a very strong point of overlap for this group and lovely. That's it.
Quick question about the Massachusetts density report. Are the criteria that establish these 10 in the state, are they like in perpetuity, like that they're always going to be those 10 designated ports? Could some of them go away in exchange for other ports, or could there be additional ports that are added to the DPA? I'm just thinking in terms of climate change, sea level rise, or other values of ports that may become in the future more significant for the fishing industry. How do we make sure that they're protected and have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, these 10, they're initially actually were 12. So it's possible for, as you were saying, changing conditions, whether, in the port itself, to review these actual lines on the map. And that's something that our office does, CZM. We'll do a designated port area boundary review. And so we actually look at the lines and look at the DPA and examine, is the DPA, is it really meeting those criteria still? And based on that review, there could be modifications, whether things are moved or actually added as well. Recently up in Lynn, we did a designated port area review and actually added the federal channel to the DPA. It's both land and port, I think, too, both land and water as well, because the federal channel up in Lynn had not been part of the DPA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would just say it goes both ways, because there have also been legislative attempts, and successful ones, to take some pieces out of DPAs. And those usually occur when the property owners get so frustrated by the inability to do anything that they come to the legislature. My hope is that we'll get to a point where we don't have to do that, and we have a more comprehensive, flexible set of rules.
Katie, did you have anything?
Yeah, just a comment. I know that because the company's located down in Rhode Island, down specifically in Point Judith. There are, and I don't know the details of it, but I could get in touch with the staff down, Rhode Island staff down there, but I believe in order to protect that port, so it remains fishing industry and not development, they have like 99-year leases from the state. So it cannot just be sold to a developer for hotels or whatnot. And I believe it was Senator Reed was able to get some money, and I'm not sure if it was federal, but or just from the state, to actually redo all those bulkheads. So it might be worth just reaching out to see how did you come up, was it a grant or something, but that's, I know, you know, a lot smaller than your New Bedford and your Gloucester. But we were able to secure that money to be able to put some life into, you know, our infrastructure down there, which is very much needed. But it might be what we can do.
You can always learn from the Point Judith fishermen, right? Always.
More Senator Reeds.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just one question, just looking at the map, and I'm new to this, you know. What area assessment? And I noticed there's nothing in the South Shore, nothing on Cape Cod. Is there a reason for that? Or, I mean, Sandwich is a lot of commercial activity in Sandwich. There's nothing regulated there. Plymouth has also had a history. So, in Chatham, I don't see any recognition there, so. Can someone explain to me why that is?
Yeah, so, you know, these DPAs, you know, it's important to think about them. These are not mutually exclusive to working waterfronts in our state. You know, there are a ton of working waterfronts in our state on the South Shore and in the Cape. Working waterfronts can even be, you know, for aquaculture, it can just be access to, you know, a mudflat area. And they could be as big as the Conley Terminal in South Boston. So, the designated port areas themselves were sort of intended to protect that sort of heavy intensive water and industrial industry, you know, that like down in New Bedford and Conley Terminal in South Boston. But that's not to say that there's not working waterfronts and important working waterfronts that we should be thinking about supporting, protecting, and, you know, how we can do to help encourage those businesses, you know, that aren't necessarily located just in these 10.
Okay, so the 10 are just the most heavily impacted.
And they were created, as I understand, historically in 1978. So they did a full assessment of the state, and that's where they identified these critical areas of heavy industry. That's not to say that, say, if one of the communities on the Cape wanted to apply to become one, that, I mean, that is allowable currently, if they can show that they have that collection of heavy industry or needs that would want them to. I think historically the infrastructure and the funding challenges have been present, and so I don't, to my knowledge, no one has asked recently to become a DPA.
Yeah, the market pressure.
The market pressure is absolutely in the opposite direction. But that's not to say that if we can't come up with a wonderful idea here, that it's precluded in the future.
I think it would be great to have a discussion of adding some of the DPAs, but my understanding is that the reason the original assessment was done, that these were chosen was it had to do with the intensity of commercial use.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, one of the challenges in a DPA is a mixed use. So sometimes in some of the ports you were describing, you have a recreational fleet and you have a commercial fleet, and when you have that mixed use, having them coexist is a little tougher in a DPA. So some of those ports were excluded for that reason. But again, that's something that we can try to think through. And one of the great challenges in a DPA is trying to have a mixed use so that, for instance, you have the wharf doing its job, but maybe you have an office up above. And there are very specific rules right now about how much non-commercial water dependent use you can have. So some of the ports didn't want to be in a DPA, they wanted to have recreational dockage that wasn't exclusive for the commercial fleet. So the mixed use is where you get into a difficulty in some of the smaller ports.
But you get kind of circuitous boundaries, right? If I showed you the map of the designated port area, New Bedford Fairhaven, right? Pope's Island Marina that we operate there isn't in the DPA, right? It kind of goes around it and up and around and protects really the hard edge, the heavy waterfront industrial. And to the senator's point, we've been fortunate in New Bedford because of the economic activity that we have not faced that pressure the way places in East Boston have when I was, and in South Boston when I was in Massport, where it's a constant battle to preserve those from more commercial and residential developments.
Yeah, Dan, and then we should probably keep.
At DMF, we often get requests when a boat owner knows there's a hearing coming up with a local select board or something, or city council about like tie-up fees or mooring rates. And so it seems to me that there's a municipal role here, one municipality at a time, that if they all turn their back on the commercial fishing industry, we're gonna have real problems. We can't, this industry, and we did what we call the Port Profile Project like 6 years ago, where we, in response to this, we did a statewide report of every community's commercial fishing, contributions and number of permits. And it seems to me that if we're gonna develop a roster of people who aren't here, could it be the Mass Municipal Association to start talking about that? Because it matters. I mean, I think that like Hyannis is the classic port that like, depending on the interest of the select board, could out some of those boats, or could, for yachts or whatever, or could keep them to be part of the scene. So to me, that's part of the complicating factors that we consider.
There's no doubt, Dan, I'd just jump in and say, because a lot of municipalities, as I mentioned, have mirroring language. So if the DPA went away, you'd still have local zoning protections, and how those get applied is an important part of the equation.
Yeah, and the other complication is what is commercial, because Ed's commercial dragger is commercial, but so is the guy that wants to run like a music tour or something. That, that he needs the boat, he needs access, but he's not producing any fish, and so it needs to be a prioritization of food production as well.
Yeah, I just want to kind of relate this to not thinking about fishing as much as thinking about offshore wind advancement in the Commonwealth. So how do these designated port areas where there are protections or non-protections impact transmission lines that would be coming in from offshore wind? Is that part of the consideration for offshore wind? Does that have any relationship at all with kind of the, and does it impact it at all? Would, the designated port area helpful to that level of commercial use? I guess it depends on what's considered commercial and how it's defined, but just curious what that would look like.
Sure, I'll give you one quick real life example in the Port of New Bedford, right? Because, we're a crowded place, space management is a challenge for the fleet. There was an old power plant site that was vacant from when I was at MOBD 35 years ago. And it's a 30-acre site that was in the DPA, so that restricted its reuse, and it sat vacant. It is now being redeveloped originally for an offshore wind support terminal. But now it'll be for offshore whatever construction support terminal. After the DPA, that would have been redeveloped decades ago, right? And would not be available. It allowed us to create net new space to support the offshore wind industry and not displace commercial fishing assets anywhere in the port, because the DPA saved that. Now, who knew 35 years ago that was going to be the case, right? But so the DPAs do protect resources that could be deployed for offshore wind as additive assets, and there are a couple of others in our port that are there because of
I've always had a question about Chapter 91 permits and how they are issued and the restrictions put on. I think that when you apply for a Chapter 91 permit, there are probably uses you have to list. And I'm not sure how restrictive they are, and I'm curious as to how one could go about researching, because what I find are things like you could have a marina that kind of catered to the commercial and fishing vessels, and they probably got a Chapter 91 permit because they said they were going to do that, and then well, let's face it, Safe Harbor is just taken over by Blackstone. Blackstone's one of the largest hedge funds in the United States, and whether they want to abide by those Chapter 91 permits and restrictions, who knows? But I've never been able to really, I'm curious as to those type of restrictions and how researchable they are.
I think that's a good question with a long answer, honestly. We could try to talk about it a little bit now, but I think what I might recommend is actually we could take that as an action item to invite DEP, the experts in chapter 91 who are administering the program, to come and present, and we can ask questions around that. But shortly, there's a list in the regulations, but I think your
So
question
it's
is
not
deeper
under
than that
CCA.
as to, no,
So
it's
that's
under,
DEP.
it's under the Department of Environmental Protection. We work closely, but yeah, it's many regulatory agencies in Massachusetts, safe to say.
Okay, let's go to that and then we should probably move to our next.
I have a follow-up to Jackie's comment about transmission lines to shore, and I'm gonna go way back when Bill White was the director of CZM. They did a presentation under Chopmaker on port areas that could be redeveloped, and also under the Mass Ocean Plan, there were preferred sites. Maybe we could share that with the commission members so that they can see those preferred landing sites, and it was based upon habitat and access to the grid. So those reports would be great to see. I don't know if that master plan for port redevelopment is still alive and actively being shopped, because that would be really good to see.
Yeah, I think that is
Coastal zone management.
for my time, very
Yeah.
safe to say.
It's
But
a
we
way
can
back.
look into that, yeah, in the way back.
Yeah.
machine. And I know that
And I'm looking at Lisa.
CEC is also
She worked
doing-
under Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doing reports.
so those transmission corridors were first put in one of the, was the 2012 ocean management plan. And then they were updated, again, and put in the ocean plan that was most recently put out in 2021. Thank you for
Which is-
these. So we can, the group can certainly share those transmission.
It's also
Planning, and it's
wonderful
also
to,
something that Todd and Holly and others have been working on, to do for the commission as well. Something that.
It's actually a great transition, Beth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Next slide, please. So I'm Todd Kelly with CZM. I'm a biologist, ecologist by training, but I've gotten into a lot of policy. And so I'm part of the team that helps with the ocean management plan that Beth was just referencing, along with Holly Emery and others. I'm also part of the seafloor mapping team. And I'm actually on the Ocean Science Advisory Council. So we're gonna see a bunch of those pieces right now. Next slide. And so basically what I'm gonna try and address is Pat's point earlier. We had a list of all these organizations. What I'm gonna talk about are two organizations that we might be able to leverage through this council, because there's already activities going on, and we're fully ramping up right now because we have an ocean plan that the legislature has asked us to review and potentially update every 5 years, and we're in that process right now. What's the background to that? The Oceans Act in 2008 is some legislation that was created that required us, coastal zone management, to create an ocean management plan for the Commonwealth. And the impetus at that time was renewable energy. We were expecting there would be renewable energy in state waters. And so the plan was the menu of all of the resources and habitats that we care about, and the water-dependent uses that we care about, and how could we encourage renewable energy and not affect these at the same time. And so in order to help us with that, the legislature required us to create an Ocean Advisory Commission. So that's 18 people who are experts in environmental policy. And Beth is on the commission, as is Senator Tarr. We also were asked to create a Science Advisory Council, and that's 9 members who are scientists and environmental policy specialists. Kevin is on that group, I'm on that group. Division of Marine Fisheries has an appointee on that group. And together, the commission helps us with writing policy of the ocean plan, and the council helps us with the scientific aspects. Where are these resources? How do we map them? How do we identify them so that we can try to resolve conflicts before they happen? Next slide, please. And so those are the two groups I'm thinking might be able to leverage through any of the questions that this council has.
So as Lisa was pointing out too, we had multiple ocean management plans, we had 9, 15, 2021. Do the math, we're in the process right now of doing a review and speeding up the OAC, spinning up the OAC, the SAC, to review our older documents and the future. So the protected habitats that we care about, they're called special, sensitive, or unique habitats. We have 12 of those, typically endangered whales and birds. But one of them, important to this group, is important fish resource areas. And our colleagues at DMF lead a working group that identifies what those are. You can see on the map on the right, the dark blue, mostly up on the North Shore. That's part of the important fish resource area, and that's based mostly on biomass. So the North Shore lights up because of things like sea scallop, lobsters, skate, flounders. You see some other deep water areas as well. You know, if we looked at that map 10 years ago, south, because of temperature changes, it's moving around. So we have an important fish resource area. We also have 6 water dependent uses, several of which are related to marine industries. So we have high potential fishing effort and value. You see that in the hashed areas, the sort of X boxes there, some on the North Shore, some on the Outer Cape. We have concentrated commercial fishing effort value. And we have concentrated commerce fishing, that's the yellow, that's basically tracks to and from ports. And then we also have some static infrastructure, the weirs and the aquaculture sites. And so we've got all that mapped here. We can look at where those things are. When a developer comes to us and says, hey, we want to build this thing in the ocean space in Massachusetts, we can bring out these maps and alert them to the needs of the fishermen, of the industry, of the things that are already in the water, the activities that are already happening. One of our limitations is that the Oceans Act starts our planning area, the area over which we have influence for the ocean plan, 3/10 of the nautical shores. It doesn't cover the port infrastructure and things like that. And this is a lot of the aquaculture. It's more of a blue water plan. And then another interesting piece, the very opening lines of the Oceans Act of 2008 says that the state will set up an ocean development mitigation fee structure and a trust fund to hold that. So basically, any developer who wants to do construction in the ocean has to pay the Commonwealth for the opportunity and detriments to the public that occur during that construction. He needs to pay an ocean development mitigation fee that goes into this trust, and that CZM has care and oversight for with the secretary, and that we use to better understand these areas so that we can map them, refine the maps, and again, help create the structure so we solve problems before they occur. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to give a couple of examples of how we implement the ocean management plan and some of the accomplishments we have. Since the first plan in 2009, all of the events that have gone through the ocean planning process have been cables, telecommunications cables, and energy cables. 6 of them, most of them, 5 of them have been in Nantucket Vineyard Sound area. Several cables have gone from Falmouth to the Vineyard. We've had several cables from offshore wind going through the process, going to Barnstable. And then on the North Shore, we've had 1 telecommunications cable landing in Lynn. And out of all those projects, the trust received $1.5 million that we've reinvested into studying the areas of interest to us. And just looking at those pictures at the bottom, anyone here from the South Shore, that's the Ulysses, that was the cable laying vessel that Vineyard Wind used. Lisa and I were out on a vessel watching this happen, took those pictures, it's like October 22 or something, December, yeah. And then on the right, so this is what's interesting relative to this conflict matrix and resolution, that is a whelk fisherman who just inadvertently placed their pots directly in the path of the cable laying vessel for that day. So we got to see this conflict resolution in action where Krista Bank called somebody who knew the, right? So she didn't have a direct line to the fisherman. They got this fisherman out of bed in someplace in Buzzards Bay area. They came out and removed the pots. And so we see how this type of work can happen in action. Next slide, please.
The question from Kate.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Quick question. What was it, 1.5 million?
Yes.
For that fund right there, are you using any of that money? I know I see it there for mapping seafloor habitats. animals, but to study any effects of the habitat and ecosystem changes once you put the cable in there, any.
The developers themselves actually study that. Holly and I and others help review the plans that they have, but that's incumbent on the developers
Okay, so
themselves, right?
nothing from the state.
And Brad, he's part of
only
that
the
team, yeah, so DMF, CZM, others, Rhode Island DEM, we work collaboratively and we review the plans that developers have for after construction, long-term, any impacts. So. Okay, next slide. So here's another, this is the example from the North Shore. This is some pictures from the environmental notification form for the Amity cable. It's a company called Alcatel that brought telecommunications cable from France and England. You can see the picture in the top right, all the way to Lynn, Massachusetts, very long cable. It's only about 1.5 inches in diameter, so it's not a really big deal. You can see the plow in the top left. You see there's a gentleman standing looking at it in the bottom right of that picture. So you give you a sense of the size of the plow that was dragged. The vessel on the bottom, that's a 400-foot ship. Turns out that wasn't actually the ship because I was just looking at the documents yesterday. But it was something like that. Alcatel owns a couple of them. 400 feet, tiny cable, big plow. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in the way. So look at the map on the right. We use the map of the fishing industry, water-dependent uses. We also looked at the habitats, but this is the water-dependent use map. And some things of importance to you, the red sort of northeast, southwest slashing lines, that is the high commercial fishing effort and value map, right? So that triggered something. The green is concentrated recreational fishing, Tim, so this is like recreational fishing groups. Concentrated commerce and traffic in there in the blue. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this space. To kind of give you a sense of what some of the other lines are, the purple line is the proposed path of the cable. The dashed brown line on land was their alternative. Hey, you could go hit Rockport, bring it on land if you don't like it in the ocean. The dashed yellow line was their original line going right across Jeffrey's Ledge. The green line is Stelling Bank National Sanctuary. The blue or black dashed line is the state boundary. But you can see there's a lot going on. So having this ocean plan framework and these layers helps to trigger a bunch of things, right? So we know there's a lot of commercial vessels. We know there's a lot of recreational vessels. There's timing. We know that when Alcatel has to do their survey, they're dragging stuff behind their vessel. So we don't want them to clip lobster lines and remove buoys. So we make sure that they have someone on board looking for that. If a buoy gets moved from its line, they tie it back. They try to find a number. They call a lobsterman. That hopefully it works. What's the other thing that they do here? They also put out a notice to mariners. So October 26th, 2022, a notice to mariners went out with a picture of the vessel. This is exactly where we're going to be. So there's a lot of communication between the state developer, making sure there's communications to folks in the field so that we can try to reduce any impact on the industry. Next slide. I got 2 more slides. So this is kind of cool. This is a picture of the Alcatel Amity cable. The red checker bar, that's a map that we created. This is one of the habitats that we map in our ocean plan, a hard and complex seafloor. These are the ledges, the boulders, big gravel fields. And this location here is just east of Rockport. This is a few miles off of Rockport, between Rockport and Jeffrey's Ledge, really rocky area. It's a nice little bend in here. And so what you're looking at in the light tan swath, those are the different levels of brown there, up all the way up to red are the fineness or coarseness of the sediment. So lightest is sand, then getting muddier, or coarser gravels, and then the red is like what they should avoid, the rocky outcrops and things like that. So we mapped rocky outcrops in the grid line. We weren't perfect, we missed a few, but they refined it through theirs. You can see the dashed red line is their original pathway that they thought they were going to do. That's about 1,000-meter wide survey area. And the black line is where they actually went. So you can see, like right in the middle, Allison, you can point to it towards the bottom. The black line goes to the left of the red, ledge.
White here. There we go.
Sorry. I just want to point out how they use the data to bring this, instead of straight down the middle, to go around this ledge, right? So this is something important to us. And Beth, what's kind of cool is all these little purple marks, these are lobster pots. So you can see there's a lot of lobstering activity here. The black dots are all something that the sonar hit on. So there's probably a rock there. or something else. So there's a lot of information, and we work with the developer to make sure that they do their best job to avoid resources that we care about and avoid things that fishermen might care about. So the point here is we have this process. If there's anything here that you would like to know more about, or that is useful, that we can refine through the ocean planning process, we're leaving that today.
And to go back to Jackie and Beth's
Yeah.
point, transmission is one of those things we could look at
Yeah.
corridors for.
Quick question, what's the depth target of those lines?
For this one, that's a really good question. They didn't have to go very deep because the cable's only this big.
Okay.
But it did have to be buried. So by state law, chapter 91, it does have to be buried. And so we already what's buried. And they do have to, there's a temperature thing that they can figure out whether or not it remains buried, and then they have to go back out and bury it. But there, I was telling Allison today, we did give them a very hard time about this one particular pinch point because it didn't look like it was gonna get buried. But because it's only, an inch, they assured us they could get it through that gravel under at least like a foot and a half.
And do they monitor it to make sure it stays buried?
That's their job, yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
where they have like a fiber optic in there, there's something they can do to the temperature, so the temperature changes, it becomes unburied, same with the offshore wind cables.
Yes, yeah.
And so they know, yeah.
So you were in charge of making sure it got buried, yeah, and do you have evidence that it's all buried at the company?
Personally, I didn't look at, all the miles of the video to ensure that, but we do ask them, and if it's the state law, they have to abide by that. In other places, they don't. So outside of state waters, this is just lying on the seafloor across all the Atlantic. And then they bury it for us because the state requires it.
So in federal waters, it's not buried?
I don't believe it is.
Okay, so,
That's how federal was.
yeah, but once you go a little bit more to the east, it's federal waters and it's in prime fishing grounds because.
Yeah.
What is the,
Over the top of Jeffries, yeah, cliffs at the top of Jeffries.
yeah, so, what is the policy around that? Obviously, the state doesn't have a policy around that for mobile gear. But, we got a lot of fishermen getting nasty emails that are around that area. Observed going towing speed that they have to give it so much of a berth. We're just wondering why it wasn't buried in federal water.
I can check into that. I don't think it's, I don't believe it's an industry standard to bury cables and bring them across the Atlantic. I don't know if I have one more slide or not. Yeah, so looking ahead, as I said, we're in the beginning of this 5-year review cycle, the end of the 5-year review cycle. We're starting the review. We're gonna focus this time on lessons learned from offshore wind, but also some other things that are happening in our marine space. The desire for offshore sand to nourish beaches is a big thing, so we're gonna really dig deeply into that. We have the governor's executive order on biodiversity. We're looking for opportunities to create a nexus between the ocean planet and that. And just what's kind of interesting on the maps on the right, what we found, if you go back to what I was saying earlier, we had one important fish resource, just one, for all the species, for all the biomass, all different types of taxa. And what we're asking and thinking about this time is to maybe break that up a little bit, at least by types of potential ocean construction. So like the map on the left is the types of species that might be vulnerable to cables being placed in Massachusetts. The one on the upper right is species that might be vulnerable to larger things like pipeline, but also sand mining. And then the little circles here are from Division of Marine Fisheries assessment surveys, the species in different strata in Massachusetts that would be most important for that type of construction in that location. So on the North Shore, you've got some things like lobster and skate and ocean scallop. South Shore, you're gonna have more like black sea bass as well, in your Nantucket Sound. And then the dark red areas, those are where the highest biomass of the things of importance are for that particular construction. So we're trying to refine our methods to get down to a construction type, to get to a small number of species, to really identify where are the places in Massachusetts that might be affected by a certain type of ocean construction that's allowed in the state.
Good.
Yeah, Kevin.
Just on the sand mining, sand is the only mineral that there's no charge for, is that right? Like when you mine sand, you don't pay anyone for the resource.
That's a good question. In state waters, I don't believe you pay for the resource that's, gonna have anyone do it. Yeah. It's a good question.
It's national.
They would have to pay the ocean development mitigation,
Right.
but that doesn't take into account like the value of
They-
it.
They don't pay for the sand, yeah, and that's something to consider.
Another thing, interesting thing in Massachusetts is because most of Massachusetts is part of the ocean sanctuaries process, the Massachusetts Ocean Sanctuaries Act. The sand that's removed from the ocean can only be put on beaches for beach nourishment. Can't be used for construction.
I will absolutely disagree with you on
And I'll
that,
agree with Eddie.
because right now we have beach nourishment project in Duxbury and Marshfield, that's bringing construction sand from inland. We have tree trunks on Burke's Beach that can't be removed right now because they put up the pipe and clover fence, so you can't remove anything once. So we're having close to 200 trucks a day come down, dump construction sand on Green Harbor Beach. And curiously, last year we had a very extensive harbor dredging project, and that sand is all going right back into the harbor. So there's a huge issue here right now with this beach nourishment project.
Yeah, I was speaking specifically to nourishment from sediments from the ocean.
That's
Yeah.
what should be.
Well, it's, yeah.
That's why we're doing the work.
Yeah, well,
It's the
that's not how, it's being done right now.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, let's keep moving.
We'll go a little faster through the next two. Okay, so the Seaport Economic Council, which you asked about. So the Seaport Economic Council, their mission is to deepen maritime economy and promote economic development and support resilient infrastructure in all 78 of Massachusetts's coastal communities. I think one of the main sort of features, or what they're most known for, is their grant program annually. So they have, I think since 2015, they've invested about $40 million in Massachusetts coastal communities, really focusing on working waterfront. I have a member here who's been on the commission longer than I have. The commission is chaired by the lieutenant governor, and it's made up of a representation of representatives from Massachusetts state agencies, from trade and industry, and dominated by our coastal communities and representatives from there. The grants are often small, but can range up to about $1 million, and they focus on 5 main areas. One, I think that we can talk about here in particular, are innovation grants to invest in innovative ideas and projects to promote job creation, economic growth in the maritime sector. Also, local marine economic development planning grants that are used, grants to support public education institutions, very connected to the next topic. We're going to talk about coastal infrastructure projects and grants within our working waterways and seaports, and then often dredging, design and permitting. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to better connect that it's really led out of the Office of Economic Development. So opportunities to pull them over in tighter partnership with us. But I don't know, Ed, Gordon, or anyone who's used the program, have anything they want to add about the SEC?
Well, from my time on the Seaport Economic Development Council, I think at first there were towns and cities that were using it more than others. And I think the success of those towns to get funding has kind of spurred on a wider interest, and we're seeing a lot more. For instance, Provincetown had never applied for grants, and finally they got some money from Seaport. It comes with a 20% match from, and it can be used, we've had harbor master build, well, we call them marine centers now, that have been funded almost to $5 million. So, and I think we've even had, I think Duxbury Maritime Center received grants, so I think it's been a very successful program in getting money out to these towns and cities that, Marshfield has gotten a lot. Our harbor master is pretty good at writing grants. So, Green Harbor's been, recipient of a lot of that money. Plymouth, Marion just recently is finishing up a new building. So I think it's been a very successful program.
Yeah, grateful recipient of Seaport Harbor Council grants of a variety of type. It does a couple of things, right? So one, it is funding the municipal harbor plan update that we are doing with the town of Fairhaven now. So it does do that planning. We're finishing up the design and engineering for a large wharf project. What that does is position us so much better for large scale federal grant funding for those projects. So the Seaport Economic Council does that sort of seed investment on the planning and design that can position us better, in addition to supporting all those communities. Many thanks to the representatives from the legislature that are here for the recapitalization last year in the economic development bill. That is proof of concept or verification of the success of the program. It has been a real differentiator, I think, since it was created for these waterfront projects. We just need more.
I think that was 100 million in new authorization for the SEC, so yes.
Infrastructure, unfortunately, some of the infrastructure in Gloucester is privately owned. But the ones that were not, we did the Boulevard infrastructure in the city of Gloucester. We did got Seaport Economic Council money just to go to the seafood show to promote Gloucester, for the Gloucester Fresh for 5 years. We were a main source on that to make sure that everyone had a voice at the trade shows. We also got infrastructure on a harbor master feasibility studies first, and then the infrastructure seed money for the harbor master's office, just like everyone else followed, Manchester, Plymouth. I mean, Seaport Economic Council is a great source to go with your leadership, with your cities, town managers, or your mayors to say, we need to work on a grant. We had Maritime that did it in plenty in New Bedford for prior also. The only thing that's scary right now is the cities and towns who don't belong to the 3A. That right now, Gloucester right now is going for a vote, and they can't apply for any of these Seaport Economic Council grants. So, the Gloucester Fisheries Commission has things to do. Jackie, all of us, that's on a standstill to find out which way that goes.
I'm sorry, would you explain that? I was
The
confused.
3As, you know how you have to have the affordable housing,
MBTA.
MBTA, 3A, yeah.
So, to that point, there have been projects that have been approved by Seaport, but because the state has decided the town has not been in compliance with the MBTA Restriction Act, they're not receiving grants. Specifically, in Situate Marshfield dredging for the South River. Milton, I believe, had a project to revitalize this pier on Hamlin Plaza River. And again, they have not been able to receive that money.
Right. So
Please do get coffee.
if I could
Thank
ask,
you.
so is this, Pat, is this the kind of target that a commission like this could be recommending to the legislature to enhance funding? Is that? What do we?
So I have to, because we do other work, we've heard three maybe limitations of this. I just want to raise them. I don't know if they're true or not. So I'm really voicing. One is that often the grants are smaller. So in order to do bigger things for infrastructure, it's not enough money. And so the big things that might make a big difference are harder to come by. That's partly related to the bond bill has a big chunk of money towards the Seaport Council, but a lot of that is never, I don't know, appropriate is probably not the right word.
Authorization, not appropriation.
Right, it's operation, not
Yes.
appropriation. So that means it's limits what the Seaport Council can give. And the last thing that people raised is that I believe under Baker, they determined that no money could go to private entities. And so for ports to have kind of a mixture of ownership, it made it harder to do some bigger things. So those are only the only I've heard now.
Yeah, I think currently, as you said, and as Gordon pointed out, it's often through a planning grant or a grant that can leverage then for larger projects, federal funds or other sources. Also a lot of resources to smaller communities that need that sort of critical to their working waterfront, smaller level of infrastructure, but certainly not like a full scale Connolly terminal renovation, which is another scale of it.
But I also agree with Dan, because you're gonna be a big group, and sometimes instead of going after the same seed money, if you're knowing what you're doing and you have representation here or a letter saying, would you support us in that one? So we can do this, and we'll do a feasibility study, fish to plate, let's just say, that we needed to do to make sure that that is feasible, and it would go all across Massachusetts as a group together, would be able to say, Seaport Economic Council, maybe one city or community would take it who has an interest in that one. And so working together, I was on the council for 7 years, so I mean, working when they first started, and so working, and then it was not even the Seaport Economic Council, it was just the Seaport. And then they changed it, there was no economic, then they added the economic to it. So it really would be good if we all helped each other, and you, not we, but you helped each other, letter of references would be nice. So you don't actually do the same exact feasible study or any other things. I think Dan's right, sometimes this is what it is. It's everyone goes after the same pot of money individually or different groups, and then they ask something, you're only gonna get a little bit. If we diverse, like Roger came up with a whole new idea, that was a great thing. If he communicated with the city of Gloucester, say we need to do more here in Gloucester, then you need to go after that. Well, until.
So Dan, here, what's funny, I think it's building on what you said, it is possible collectively you all decide, because fishing up is piecemeal, right?
Yeah.
Because if we come up with a broad vision for the Seaport Council, don't invest it all in one place, but invest it sensibly and strategically across places that are connected.
Yeah, I think the working waterfront infrastructure issues that we've talked about so far, I don't think the Economic Council is the solution to that, right? I think what it does is extraordinarily well, and it does it for a whole bunch of communities and that kind of stuff. What I think we need to be advocating for on the infrastructure side is a level of investment at a very different scale. And also accessible to private parties as well as public parties. That, I think that is grant funding. I think that's a revolving loan fund as well, perhaps at low interest. Just to get the capital out there. So we should support the Seaport Economic Council. We should continue to capitalize it. It does great work. I think what we need is something else.
We're at time. Should we try to?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it's building our discussion we'll have after lunch. Okay.
But the best thing also is the perfect thing that he said, mass development should be here, because it all coexists with one another. Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay, resilient coasts. So the goal of the Resilient Coast Initiative is to develop a comprehensive statewide strategy for coastal resilience across the Commonwealth. So this has been a project that we've been working on across the Commonwealth with all of our community partners for the last year plus. There's been so much good individual work by our communities on coastal resilience. We thought it was important to have time to have a sort of consistency and understand the next level of support that we're going to need as a Commonwealth for implementation. So we've been doing stakeholder engagement, a lot of analysis. We're expecting to release a draft of the plan this spring. It's going to have a couple features. One is that it creates 15 coastal resilience districts across, and you can see we have much more specific maps than this, which you can see sort of wispy colors that broadly indicate those districts. It also presents strategies and best practices for what types of resilient solutions work in which types of contexts. I think very relevant to this group is understanding and acknowledging that while coastal resilience facing flooding and hazards, it hits our ports and working waterfronts, the solutions we need are different in those areas than they are in some other parts of our coast. We need to be able to develop solutions that continue to maintain that active and working access to the water while we're hardening or elevating or whatever the strategy selected in those areas are. I think another key feature of the plan is it looks at areas where there are concentrations of either housing or economic development and industry that are at early risk and are opportunities for investment and resources to address those sooner risks that we're seeing today. So we're calling those our early adaptation areas. And I think most importantly, then to pull it all together, it makes recommendations for state action that we can take to prioritize resources, to change the way we're working with our communities to more effectively and broadly support their own actions in this space. So this is more of a stay tuned. We've got a big project on coastal resilience and happy as we come out with it to come and present and talk more about critical next steps and how they interact with this group. Yeah.
Sorry, just.
No, please.
Here's a bunch of ties, I'm back here, I'll move my, just, I'd be curious with those of us around the room, how familiar we are. That was this is the first time I've heard of it, and I don't know how everyone else feels, but like, seeing that you said you conducted public meetings, like I wish fishing industry or at least my group or other, I don't know if other people had been involved in some of those public meetings, but I think we're at a great place here with the wealth of expertise in the room to think about when we're in meetings, who is missing from the conversations, who we need to bring in.
Yeah, I think we can always do better to pull more folks in and I will use this as a call. We're happy to come and talk to any group about the progress to date and get input while we're still in that space. And yeah, I think it's a good question. How many, have people heard of it before or is
I'm participating in it.
Okay, good.
I've been participating in it since inception and listening to the public's comments. I mean, from inland, there's people that are concerned about saving mosquito larvae to the commercial fishermen that want, the resources protected. So it was really good to listen.
There's a breadth of strategies and
it's gonna be good to, and of course, we express the fishing industry's concerns and stuff like that, so. And we share any type of meetings in our weekly email, so keep an eye out there.
Allison, when does it come out?
So this spring, we're expecting a draft to come out for public comment.
So that could be
And so
potentially a time.
That'll be a great moment, but if anyone wants to talk before that, who hasn't gotten moved in to date, we're happy to come and do a
And
dedicated.
the last meeting was like a couple weeks ago, I forget, it's a blur, but I suggested having one in person or two in person and two virtual.
Yeah.
Depending on the timing, I know it's coming pretty quick, so.
Yeah, we're working on scheduling sites now, so if anyone has a big in-person room, let's talk after. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Apparently not Boston.
No,
No, not Boston. Heard.
Last person, just a thought, we have
Yeah.
a brand new giant training ship, Mass Maritime, we do have big spaces on there.
That's wonderful. I will find you at lunch. Thank you.
I teach there.
That's great.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Allison, for doing those. We have two more left and then lunch. We could do seafood marketing first and then we'll go to the store.
Story read, I can be quick here, but I'm staying, sitting. So our seafood marketing program, we can go to the next slide, thanks, was established by legislation about 10 years ago. Another thank you to Senator Tar and his colleagues for getting that done. And that legislation established $250,000 annual budget for the program and also a 19-member steering committee. Talk about that a little bit more in a minute. The mission, according to the legislation, is to increase consumer demand and preference for local seafood products to support the Commonwealth's fishing industry and the residents and communities that benefit from those activities. And the objectives you can see there, I won't read them all, but this is about education, consumer awareness, making sure the public knows what's being landed in Massachusetts and available through our local seafood shops and restaurants. We can go to the next slide, which is about the steering committee. So the steering committee is 19 members, chaired by Dan, the director of DMF. And that steering committee is prescribed in the legislation. It's made up of certain industry members. It kind of says, like something like a member from the commercial lobster industry, the scallop industry, et cetera. Other government agencies and elected officials. And those members that are not specifically laid out by the legislation are appointed by the director of the, that's the industry members. So the role of that steering committee is to advise and assist the DMF in the administration of the program. And we really value that guidance and the expertise that's in the room. We get together usually twice a year, maybe more, maybe less, depending on what the circumstances are. But those meetings generally focus on current issues related to the markets, for specific species, or whatever happens to be going on at the time. You see a few pictures at the bottom. The middle one is a response advertisement that we placed on one of the vineyard ferries last summer after there was some negative advertisement towards the lobster industry by PETA. So that was decal that was placed on the table. So that was, one instance where we reacted pretty quickly to something that was going on that the steering committee brought to us. On the right, you see a new educational pamphlet for kids that we're trying to get out to restaurants. So different things go on like that. Those are some of the activities. I'd say a big piece of this program are strategic partnerships. And these have grown and changed over the years, but I think what we're finding now, we had a great regional meeting at the Seafood Expo in the middle of March with a bunch of other states and regional organizations kind of saying, what can we do to pool our resources and do more marketing together to market local seafood? We do plenty of outreach events, both targeted at consumers and industry. We are currently doing several different types of education videos, and they're mostly shorter, geared towards social media, kind of what gets out there today. So we've got 15 culinary videos in process and a 4-part little mini documentaries on the local seafood industry. So we're working on those. Small grant programs have always been a tool we've used to leverage our funds to get them out to other Massachusetts organizations doing similar work. So that's a real brief snapshot of what this program and the steering committee do to react to emerging issues and just support the seafood industry as best we can. We've also heard a lot about port infrastructure today, and we did do that port infrastructure report about 5 or 6 years ago through our seafood marketing funds, and we'd like to do that again. So
You want to mention grants?
sure, our grants
Yeah.
we've given out, periodically we've done targeted small grant programs, kind of based on what the steering committee has suggested is important at the time. So that has been for educational purposes, for videos, for all different types of awareness and outreach that other groups are doing to kind of leverage other expertise.
And the leader of the program, Wendy, she has taken on a prominent role with MDAR and by assisting MDAR in giving grants to the seafood industry from their own programs.
Yeah, the two things to mention there, she's definitely become a point person with MDAR on the seafood applications for the food security infrastructure grants. So that's kind of both advocating for the seafood industry to be a major part of those, be a recipient, and also DMF helps to review those grant applications as needed. And then second, I'm glad you mentioned MDAR, the Food Policy Council that MDAR manages and is legislatively the membership is legislatively appointed. Seafood is not a permanent member of the Food Policy Council, but Wendy is present at every meeting and giving updates on the seafood industry. And we hope to have a seafood representative on the Food Policy Council if that legislation can be amended in the future. So that might also be something for this group to keep an eye on. We can keep you posted on that. MDAR, Mass Division of Agricultural Resources.
Thank you.
MDAR.
Not another act.
They do a lot of food.
Yeah.
So,
We have Al, those food people.
One thing I would hope that you would add to that would be traceability, seafood traceability. I think that will go a long way in promoting locally caught seafood. Can the consumer know exactly where it's coming from? It's not always properly labeled in markets.
Yeah.
Restaurants.
That's a good point. We have done some work on traceability over the years, but not recently, so.
I'd like to thank the program. We've received a few grants that has afforded us the ability to rebrand our educational and outreach material. And we are able to give fishermen a small stipend to go out to large groups and talk about all the good stuff that the Massachusetts lobster fishing industry has done to protect right whales, to conserve the resource. And we're going to an event later this month on a Saturday. A gentleman contacted us from the Shriners, and it's 350 people in East Springfield. I don't even know where that is. It's west, but we're going. So 350 people are going to get educated, and they're coming from all over the United States, and they have a big lobster feast. So thank you for the program.
Years ago, I don't know if it was associated with COVID, but there was a great Massachusetts commercial that you were on, Dan, promoting Massachusetts seafood, that I came across not expecting. That was phenomenal. And I think for anyone who saw it, that was great. I don't know if it's was it part of this program or was that part of the? That was great.
Two of those.
He won't give me his autograph, but that's okay.
I know, I was like, why is Dan there? What's going on? He's He's very positive. It was great.
Well, it was needed at the time because the markets were
Yes.
collapsing. right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and we did a lot with the direct sales
Yeah.
to the public and just to get the restaurants back.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Not necessarily on that market, but on MDR and food security grants. I don't know, come up later, but I'm going to say. I think what we need to do is push for our own slice of that pie specific to fisheries and have and be able to have a review committee that fishing industry appoints. I'm not sure that under the current food security grant process that the reviewers have quite a reasonable field.
all right, well, let's move to our last one. Dan, I have your slide up.
Sure, all right. This is our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, which unfortunately gets routinely confused with this new group. In fact, someone got appointed to this group and thought they were appointed to the other group. So if I had my way, if I had talked to Bruce Tarr 3 years ago, I might have renamed this a little differently, but so be it. This commission goes back to the 1960s. The governor asked that a group be put together to address or identify the problems in marine fisheries. And from that, he created the commission. And then once the commission was established, the commission recommended that it be made permanent and also was given regulatory authority at that time as well. So under Chapter 130-17A, that's the statute that drives this, and that is they are a 9-member citizens board, and Tim Brady here is one of them, that votes on proposals to amend fishing regulations, which is where you fish, how you fish, when you fish, and how much fish you can take. Obviously, the evolution of fisheries management in the past 60 years or 65 years has created a whole lot of other people who dictate that, such as the the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, the New England Council, and the Mid-Atlantic Council. But this commission gets together every month and advises me, and also on the issues of permitting, they advise me. So the things that they come together for every month are ideas about ways to address permitting, ways to address trip limits and quotas and things like that, like how we use our quotas. So anyway, it's a very I think it's a very well established system. Great input from the members, MLAs, executive president Cookie Sawyer is also on that, and as is the member from the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance. So it's a lot of the same organizations that are represented. And so, going forward, I think the conversation we've had today kind of demonstrates that this group is really thinking big. Obviously, this advisory commission is kind of in the weeds, and I think that will stay that way. I will report to them on the developments of this. I think some of the members of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission might be interested in listening in to some of these meetings, those who aren't necessarily represented by the organizations who are here. But just a heads up of what this other group does. And of course, they also appoint and could remove the DMF director with the approval of the commissioner. So I keep them all very close.
Any questions? Yeah, Ed?
So Dan, are the 9 members, is that set in stone that it's 9 members or is it
Yes,
just?
it is a 9-member, but it's not designated. It just says members who are knowledgeable about fisheries, experience or training, something like that. Yeah, and so the makeup of that commission is kind of at the discretion of, it's a governor's appointment, by the way, of the governor, hence the secretary, hence the commissioner, and with public input. And so, over time, if there aren't enough recreational seats on there, you tend to get some pressure from that sector. We like to have someone on there that represents the dealer interest. We used to have a gentleman named George Berkowitz back in the 80s when I first started from Legal Seafoods. And but over time, we usually have a dealer or someone with experience in that sector and a whole bunch of commercial.
Other questions or comments for Dan?
Now, are the term limits or are you appointed?
They
for
are
a specific amount of
3-year terms and they're staggered. So every year, 3 of the members need to be reappointed.
But there are no limits. You can serve.
I'm sorry, the 3-year terms, but there's no.
Consecutive 3-year terms.
That's right. And I think the record was probably Bill Adler, who I think served for over 20 years.
Probably 25.
Who's getting?
Since the inception.
No.
all right.
It seemed like that.
Late 80s, early
Yeah.
90s.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was a lot of presentations. We are not going to do that again after lunch. So thank you for sitting through that. Thank you to all of the presenters. So it's 12:08. Let's come back at 12:40. You have half an hour.
12:35.
Okay, we're gonna aim for 12:35. There's lunch that we set up in the hallway here. We'll go help unwrap things. There's restrooms all the way down there. Thanks, Pat, for coffee. There's water fountains and some beverages. Folks that are listening in, there's food and free. Okay, thank you, everyone. 12:35.
So, what we want to do is we had a lot of those topics from our interviews with you all. So we want to do a little minty polling and we'll explain how that works. Everybody can make sure they can do it. And it's mostly just to get a flavor for where the room is in terms of the commissioners about which topics are more important or less important. And even new ideas came up today. So this is just to kind of get us going in discussion items. The goal, and I'll turn over to Abby, is really to see if we can land on a narrower set of topics that we want to work on and what actually work on them means. Not only now, but then between now and the next commission meeting in terms of work that we have. So Abby, I'll turn it over.
And I think we also just wanted to share, Pat, some of the potential products that we think could come out of this group, and these came from our interviews. So one, there is just an idea of like shared learning. If we need to bring in any presenters to gather more information, we can do that easily. There's the idea of having influence, whether that's writing letters to the governor, to the legislature, to state agencies, or those some of the existing bodies that we talked about this morning. Opportunities for analysis, writing policy white papers or doing research, and then planning, whether that's creating an economic development plan or a strategic plan for the industry. Those are some of the ideas that you all had, and the types of products that could come out of this group. Okay, so let me do this. So as Pat said, we want to do an online poll, and we're going to take it in 3 steps. So we're going to ask if you have a smartphone. I think the easiest way to do it is to use this QR code. And if you are on a laptop, you can do this. And if you don't have either, just raise your hand and we'll bring you pens. And then once you're in, it should have a little green arrow. until I move it forward. Okay. Yeah, you're waiting for me, and I'm waiting. How's it not? You know. Oh, okay. Oh, perfect timing. Great, do that. Yes. Okay, so for the first question.
I need the code again.
Okay. Okay. Kevin, do you have it?
No, but that's slow down for me.
Do you want to write it down so that we?
Try it.
Okay, and Ed, are you in? Like to say this is the most tedious part, but honestly, it's a little tedious of a poll, but we do think it's gonna be very helpful to just get a sense. Okay, Pat, would you write down the number for Ed if he needs it?
I get it. As you get it.
Okay, okay, so the first question is of those economic diversification topics that we presented in the slides and shared with you beforehand, they're captured here in like a shorthand. We want to know on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not interested, 5 being very interested, how interested are you in discussing this with the commission? It would be helpful if you didn't put 5 for everything because we are trying to.
Make some choices.
But there's no limit really. And we'll do economic diversification, then we'll do all the offshore wind ones, and then the regulatory.
5 is the most.
5 is very.
5, you're very interested, 0 or 1, I guess 1,
Can
you're
we
not.
put 4.9?
If it lets you, try it.
Just commission
It's
members.
integer.
So just commission members, if we could,
Thanks.
we evaluate everybody's opinion, but the commission members more.
Not true, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, and we'll give like a minute or two. There's a lot of tiny font to read. Now we've got 8 people. So
We have how many people? 13?
I think we have. To our plans.
It's like a horse race, the carnival. We're waiting for one more.
Yeah, 2 more technically. Well, let's do 30 more seconds and then we're gonna move on.
We want to go through all of them, we want to stop and talk about these.
I think we should talk a little bit.
Okay.
Or maybe just call out some of the ones you're looking at. Okay, great.
All right, there we go. Okay, so I think it's fun to watch the race. I don't know if the race influenced those who pulled later, but whatever. Really, I think we didn't find more about what economic development and making industry stronger, reducing risk means, but that came out strong, slightly ahead, came out about the infrastructure and port investment, and we really heard that a lot in the comments today. And then the other two, keep moving. The other 2 is local seafood marketing and then growing markets for local sustainable seafood, which, can kind of go into a category. So that, I mean, there's others that are not weak in their response, but I think those are the kind of 4 that seem to come out. Shoreside has caught up a little bit, so we can think about that. So I think what I'm seeing is the infrastructure and kind of the market space, right? And so I think we're in a little bit, we're gonna come back and say, okay, if that's kind of where the point will show, what can this commission do? What should we work on in the next 3 months, next month? but we'll kind of note that for now, so we kind of see. And now we want to go to the next topic, and this is around offshore wind. So what are the things that, or you think the commission could work on regarding offshore wind?
Okay, and ignore the pick two, that was a holdover. We're again gonna do the not interested as one, very interested as five. Yeah, Beth.
I shut my page down. That's the QR code.
Oh, yeah, let me try. Yes, oh, Beth, if you come up here, or if you just go to menti.com. Put in that code.
Menti.com.
Yeah, or.
Oh, boy, a lot of good ones here.
Here, I actually got the code right here. On paper.
Oh, nice.
Pick two.
Sorry, don't pick two, rate them all.
Wait, oh, we're in tomorrow.
And just to clarify here, the DMF managed funds are those like the innovation funds through Vineyard Wind that. One more minute.
Oh.
We have like one more person. There we go.
It's a horse race.
Okay. All right, so this one's a little harder to read, but we've got, I think what comes out on top is improving sort of state offshore wind policy procurement procedure for a meaningful seat for fishing at the table. Then it looks like right behind that, there's a 3.7 for developing best practices for mitigating impacts. Up above is the developing the framework for DMF managed funds. Those seem to be the three strongest. But there's also the developing recommendations on transmission is still in there a little bit. Maybe that could get folded into the second one that's got the highest. So, and recommending policy and guidance was kind of broad, so maybe that doesn't fit terribly into the second one, maybe. So I think we're talking like, how do we, this fishing can get a more meaningful seat at the table for offshore wind development within the state? Again, and then I think we're talking about kind of the DMF managed funds and mitigating impacts, and then transmission maybe. All right, great. Okay, we have, the next one we have is like the other stuff.
Close. 30 more seconds for the last two. This is the last one. Okay. And I think we're at.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, so we've got ensuring state plans, activities and policies and fisheries and fishing, so that's tied to kind of existing plans and the like. And then the other one is improving the science of fisheries management. And then Then a little bit just behind is the promoting innovations. Okay. All right. Good enough. All right, so I think what we want to do is we want to go back through each of these kind of buckets and talk about, can we go back and still see the results? Okay. All right. So I think it's good for us to talk a little about, and I want you to think about 3 months, like, before the next committee meeting, and then maybe by the end of the year. So I know some of these topics are like multi-year topics, but I'm thinking about like what practically can this commission do?
Okay. One of the concerns that I have is I have a seafood marketing steering committee. In the seafood markets for local seafood is one of the charges of this group, then it makes the other group redundant. So I understand, and I'm not sure if we had said this before we did the poll, I keep in mind that there's a seafood marketing committee, or there's a Vineyard Wind Innovation panel that's gonna provide us guidance with how to spend that money. The issue of redundancy is important to keep in mind, so I just wanted to be clear that what is it about the seafood marketing and growing markets that this group, because a lot of you are on the same seafood marketing steering, so let's figure this out.
Yeah, no, so I think that's right. So, yeah, so let's, okay.
That's zero to your budget, right? Advocate with the legislature to make that 250,000, 2.5 million for seafood market, just drop in the bucket, but like, this is a group of voices that can probably fight for that.
So this.
We don't want to do it, we want to help you have the resources.
So in this case, the commission would be a independent legislator for a moment.
Same thing.
It's the same thing, $250,000 could never solve the problems that we're faced with right now. So augmenting that process, but I think too, what would be important would be to have some sort of metric as to measure the success of the seniors. And that being said, I am a member of the seafood market.
All right, so I think on seafood marketing, because you've got a mechanism, but maybe not enough money. Exactly. Dollar support. I want to just tie to that while we're on it. In terms of growing markets for local sustainable seafood, is this commission invite IMDAR in here to talk about it and encourage, as I think someone suggested, its own kind of pot of money? What would we do there that would be useful?
Absolutely. Roger, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I remember when we were talking about this seafood collaborative, the opportunity for public purchasing, bulk purchasing of seafood, right? To tap into some of the species that are not being fished right now or way below their quotas, right? That opportunity for the state to put a shoulder behind the actual market creation for some of those species. I don't know if that's the sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm looking at that in terms of, let's say flatfish as an example, you could actually tie that in with the marketing. So that you sort of, you can put a number of these things together. And that could be sort of a focus, the marketing group as well. To take some of these species that need attention.
There was also an idea from earlier in the discussion about getting us like a fishing representative in the MDR decision.
Is it the Mass
making around.
Food Council? Is that the issue? So
Sorry,
getting a seafood person on the Mass Food Council, is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is that would take legislation that has already been filed,
Oh,
so.
it needs to support before.
And I'm trying to think, is when kick off the senior guy who runs the food council?
He is a principal at Undar, he's their deputy commissioner.
Yeah, deal with him. Okay. Anything else on seafood marketing, which I think we're talking about primarily again, to not, kind of confuse groups. It's really about supporting and actually growing the fund, potentially asking for clearer metrics, and actually thinking for IMDAR to come in here and talk a little bit more about how really seafood can really be a part of the story. All right, that's good. All right, let's talk about working waterfront, the kind of port investment. So I think what we heard is the Seaport Council can be really great. It has a lot of good planning grants. It tends to do a lot of small reports. but kind of at scale, it may not be, but just may not be fit for purpose with that question. So I guess the question here is, what else should this group do to think about, investment, how much you need, where you need, what would benefit the industry across the state? We don't want to get into a reason roller together, so hopefully we can manage the, inevitable tensions between ports. But I'm just curious what people think about, what can this group do about this? So what are things?
Just, thinking of how we can in tandem to some of the efforts that are being done on like the federal level, there's a lot of working waterfront infrastructure bills in play right now where they would be having revolving loan funds or designating permanent working waterfront so that it can't be bought out. What entities are eligible, whether it's nonprofits, fishing co-ops. I think there are things that are being done on the federal level that could translate to the state and thinking about some of these ports and making them stronger and just in terms of like grant programs for whether it's a fishing co-op or nonprofits or others that want to try to strengthen some of these.
So the one thing is trying to track federal legislation, what's flowing there, sounds like one thing for sure.
Would it make sense to have a future meeting where we bring in the Harbor Masters Association and folks like from your office that deal with working waterfront issues and brainstorm with them about where we should channel our energies? Because
I mean, I think from the port profile project, that would be really good too, is making sure that all harbor masters and town officials are aware of it. They should be, but that's a great place to give them the leverage of meetings to talk about the value of their town and the number of active permits.
well, we can bring that in.
Right.
But I'm
I'm
just
saying.
wondering, then what do they do with it? Because I know they used our port profile project successfully for
Yeah.
their community to put that in their grant application saying that, my town has, or my city has X number of
Right.
of participants and the landings of this. So, but I just wonder if they might be a good entity to be part of the conversation.
I think, yeah, and obviously the harbor masters have to say, but I think they tend to take their margin orders from either mayoral on city level or increasingly town managers on the town level. So that is, I think, group that you would like to engage is because I'm not sure that the harbor masters are making that little decision.
But I was wondering if they knew where the needs were, like if.
Well, I mean,
Or does this group
Again,
know where the need, where's the needs of? the
yeah,
industry?
well, the relationship to fishermen and harbor masters isn't always the best. And, in a lot of places, the harbor master, it used to be more of a managerial position and now it's kind of seeded into more of like a law enforcement. Because we now have harbor masters that are part of the town police force. So they're under a separate contract, they're under separate. But again, I think most of those decisions being made about are more happening at the town manager.
Okay, but I heard you say earlier, your harbor master in Marshall, really good at writing grants.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that if we had other folks like that who are knowledgeable about what their needs are, they should be part of the council.
Well, I'm not saying that they wouldn't be part of the conversation, but I'm just
But I
saying,
don't know how they get involved. How do we invite them in?
well, I'm not saying you don't invite.
Yeah, okay.
Not every harbor master is created equal. Marshfield Harbor Masters, retired Coast Guard and Marshfield Police.
Yeah.
Sergeants.
Yeah, Sergeant.
Aubrey.
Just another thing that just came to mind when I was talking is, we have a rock harbor on the Cape and they wanted to redo their pier and get like the Chatham Fish Pier with an observation deck and get tourists and everything to come through. And there was a lot of town support, but there was also some pushback on, what is this? This is gonna add increased taxes for us. Do we really want this? And there was a big effort to show not only the value, I think it was $4 or $7 million or something that the town brought in, but that there was ex vessel value of all the support and shoreside businesses and restaurants. So I think some of the things that we could be doing is bringing the harbor masters or bringing the town managers in, but also making sure that like the general public understands those kind of trickle down ex vessel effects that could be needed for working waterfront infrastructure so that there's more buy-in by the communities that maybe haven't been historically.
I think Aubrey makes a great point. Every port's gonna have different people who know their port. Every port's gonna have different point people who are gonna be gonna have more specific knowledge of what that harbor needs. So it's not just gonna be, it might be the harbor master of one port, but it might be somebody else in another. So you have to actually engage with the port and say, you know, who do you want to represent your port, who knows the best, knows the needs.
Before we invite them in, maybe we should send them a survey to see what their needs are.
Well, that's what we did in the port profile project,
Right.
and that's what we're gonna do again, but that's probably. I mean, it's hard to get the harbor master's attention in the high season, so that might have to wait till the end of the year, late fall.
I wonder if the port profile report, which is how old the story?
5 years.
And it was focused very much on commercial fishing, right, or fishing, not on other stuff like cargo.
Correct.
So I wonder if it'd be even useful for the commission to, or a small group between now and the next meeting to actually review a story, go through it, talk about what they're missing. I know you guys are gonna do an update. And I did ask Greg, well, does it have any dollars associated with it? And it doesn't, I think, currently, right? Correct. So one of the questions is this group, back to Gord's point, is this group may need to start attaching dollars to things? Because then you can make the case to the legislature, if you have a vision, if you have a plan, and if you have a request that means how much, right? I think that's something this commission can do that probably no one else collectively quite for fishing, I think.
And I think one of the big takeaways from the profile project was the need for dredging, like parking, crane, you know, and as we learned earlier, some of the dredging benefits can happen at designated port areas, but maybe not other areas. And so like, how can we think about supporting that?
Okay, so are there other thoughts about how this group can be effective? I mean, I think there's some homework to do here to do it more, but other thoughts about economic development and how this group, we're going to look for volunteers for in-between work, by the way, we'll come back.
So, but I think you almost finished the point of the story. Do you want like a subcommittee of this group to review last port profile project and make recommendations for what could be in the next one that maybe was missing?
Yeah, and also the survey questions that we ask both the harbor masters and the commercial fishing industry.
Right.
That would be really helpful. So,
all right. So I think what we're going to do before we leave, for some volunteers to do some different things, and that would be one. I mean, I think, and Gordon and others know this, I mean, there is a broader effort around ports and a kind of group called MATA that's been formed to try to kind of really advance just generally port infrastructure for kind of every use that's working waterfront, not residential condos. And so that's in the works too. So at some point we need to kind of connect with that effort as well. But we'll, we can Gordon keep this track of that.
And the ports compact, which was something that existed, I don't know, a decade or more ago, is being sort of revitalized with the urging of the lieutenant governor. So that will sort of hopefully add to the dialogue as well.
And the ports compact was started, that was created out of MassDOT or out of economic development?
I think MassDOT. Problem is, if I could just vent.
You can.
When we had the first ports compact meeting, and this was, I think it was originally under Governor Patrick, but we had a meeting last fall, and somebody said, well, there was a port strategic plan that MassDOT did, you know, in 2016 or 17. We should get a copy of that. So contacted MassDOT and said, can we get a copy of and you can see sort of breadcrumbs of the strategic plan if you're Googling around, like there's some images of front pages and that kind of thing. And the response came back that MassDOT can't find it, right? So somehow, right, and MassDOT's been pretty strong for decades that they don't do ports, right? That's not what they do. They do rail, they do highway, they do airports, but they don't do ports. But that was sort of disappointing, but very telling, right? That there was at some point this strategic plan that was done a decade or so ago, and it's now in the ether. So that's another reason why I think this group can kind of force that attention and hopefully drive better and more planning. I think the port profile sounds like a perfect place to start.
And Gordon, we found it.
I was gonna say, they have it. Okay.
I didn't, I won't say who found it, but we have it.
Okay.
So we
Can
will.
you share it?
Yes, so
Yes.
we've got a whole bunch
It's a
of.
Christmas miracle.
I know, I don't quite know how it happened, but anyway, I didn't ask, I just got it. So but people were paid, people, I don't know. Anyway, we've got a whole bunch of port, there've been a ton of port planning over the last 20, 30 years, and we've tried to assemble all the reports we could get our hands on. So we'll talk about file sharing and where we can put this stuff, so.
That would be great.
And you got this for this initiative?
I got this for related issue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna stop ranting.
I got a copy of it, because we're on the Seaport Economic Council, we're the one who paid for it, and then
That's
Mashport and all of that, yes. So, yeah, no, there is one.
Exactly. Okay, so again, but to Gord's point, I think one of the conversations we could even have is, DOT in many other states actually does have a meaningful role in ports because it's transportation, right? The state has chosen not to do that.
I did use the word omniscient. Yeah.
But that only sets me up for failure, Dan. Say that I'm something I'm lousy, I think,
I don't feel like looking at the voices either.
okay.
The fact that he has.
Anything else on economic development? Anything else?
Well, what about the fishermen's training programs that I know a couple of fishing organizations have endeavored to do? And I think even at the community colleges, there's talk about courses like on welding and things like that. Is that?
Boat schools, as you bet.
Yeah, the boat schools.
Shortly before this meeting, I was having a conversation with Tori Monty. We kind of talking about that a little bit. And Partnership Support Services does safety training, and recently they did a safety training in Provincetown. They had like 30 kids from Cape Cod and vocational. Yeah. But then the conversation turned to, you need to fix the industry first before you can get these young people in, because this is an industry that no one wants to get into.
Yeah.
Because it's broken. And that is an issue. So, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying,
You need a stable fishery for groundfish. We don't even know if we're gonna be fishing on it first. So we have no idea what the cod quotas are gonna look like. No one knows if we're gonna be asking for a groundfish disaster come June, July of this summer. So it's kind of hard to be talking about training new people to come to an industry that we need to get stability on. So it's a great idea and concept, and you do have an aging fleet, but we need to focus on. I just don't think that's part of this group, but I think, that's a fisheries management. There needs to be stability from a different place to then allow for there to be, innovative ideas and visionary ideas of how to build the fishery, but we can't sustain the fishery right now, so. I think we have to put that on, I would recommend we put those type of concepts on pause until we know what the fisheries, and it's not every, it's different for every fishery, but it solves another, I don't know what the fleet's looking like there, but they have their own issues as well. I mean, and another thing, this is very industry focused, like infrastructure and marketing, it's very broad, and, I could always go to my membership and come back with recommendations on what are some of the, and not from a fishery management standpoint, but what is the groundfish industry think that they may need for, or what is the recreational fishery think they may need, or what is the scallop industry, think of it as a Commonwealth industry perspective too, on what some of the top priorities may be. That's just thought, there could be some, that could be port-based, community-based, or fishery-based.
Let's actually talk a little bit about, say, we're not asking you to go out and do a sophisticated, statistically accurate sample survey, but I'm wondering if we could here today and maybe we could actually after today develop some common questions or whatever, but like whether it's by fishery, gear type, port, or some combination. What about kind of folks here going home and having some conversation about what people think they need in terms of infrastructure development? That will be more informal, but I wonder if we could do that. So if we did that, how should we organize the?
Can I tell you what I've been hearing, some of them too, that fishing vessels that had 5 or 6, they're lucky if they can get any crew. And some of the crew that drops off, when I talk to them, they said, you know what, it's not sustainable, but I'd like to do something else. And what it is when they have trouble with something, to get it in the railways, to get a welder, to get scuba diving, underwater welder, to get any of like the blue collar work, there was no one out there either. And some of these younger kids said, I wouldn't mind training, go fishing, because this way we don't have to come in, we can fix the ones, we can fix things on board, but. And they're doing it anyways, being a mechanic on board, but there's no training or certificate if they had to drop off and where they can go and actually succeed. So I know we have to do infrastructure, and we have to do sustainability of the fishing industry, and some boats that, well, you'll hear that, like Jeremiah said, he has 5 boats, it can only go up 4. One engine's not done, but he still can't, they're rotating crews even to go on because they can't sustain it. But some of the crew members that left wanna go into a different field to help the industry. And it's the blue collar, it's a lot of things, you can't get the mechanics, you can't get the welders right away, you can't get that. You know, you should make a phone call and they used to come, no one wants to come anymore. And so where are they? And if you're gonna do with wind turbines on those boats and whatever, who's gonna fix them? You need blue collar. You need welders, you need scuba divers who can weld underwater. You need mechanics on board. You need all of these engines that you certified on these fishing industry engines. So when a boat used to be able to come in, remember, Al, we call them, we're coming in, you call Seatrons, every day, crew right there waiting for you. You're lucky 3-4 days before you can get someone. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know, you all can understand that better than I can.
Can you share these questions with us, these surveys, so that we can go back to
Yeah.
our members and have discussions with them and maybe come back with some more information?
What we can do is we can try to, we'll try to put a flat, we'll find one, so there's a little thing there. We'll show you, we'll give you these results, you have them, and then we can get those out to you. And so I'm thinking, I mean, maybe just each of you go and talk to your folks. So Gordon obviously is gonna go talk to folks in New Bedford. Aubrey's gonna try to talk to folks on the Cape. Beth, you'll talk to Lobster, and, Al and some others, you can talk to folks on Gloucester. Eric can reach out to New Bedford, and you can reach out to directions. South Shore.
The whole thing is if you can't go fishing, you don't need it.
And so we'll give you, what we'll do is we'll work to get you out pretty soon, these questions, and maybe a little bit of something you can just fill out, give us back, and you all bring it back, along with some other work we're gonna do, a story. Does that make sense? You want to do that?
Question with the economic development, the first one, making industry stronger, reducing risk for industry. I know you think you were saying a little bit more clarity on reducing risk. But to me, when I was voting on economic development, making industry stronger, I was thinking some of it, especially with training, personally. Just from the fact that a lot of the guys I talk to, don't have crew, or they're going out one-handed and they can't find crew. So in order for them to be sustainable, they need that, not even just necessarily next generation, but just needing the current industry to be able to do their job effectively. And so I think welding, electrical work is just other skills that they can learn. And I've been getting this sense, the young fishermen that I do talk to, men and women, they've been getting more into collaborative research as another way of sustaining themselves, because it's money they can count every month on top of the variability of fishing. So I do think there is some opportunity. I guess I'd just be curious what other people think about reducing risk for industry, because I was thinking of this fishing training.
Do we, just a question, maybe it goes farther to you, and does somebody have a listing of all the various kinds of trainings for fishermen and crew that are kind of out in Massachusetts currently? Yeah, you.
Not that I know of, but I can look into that.
Seacrine used to have a great program back in the day, but '80s, when they had all kinds of things happen in Mass Maritime.
Yep.
Two-day trips. But anyway, what was I going to say? Something. I forget. I forget now. I'll leave it.
Yeah, I think it certainly ties in with the economic and the uncertainty, but the changes that are going on now, the cuts in the federal base and stuff, there's going to be even more uncertainty and delay in estimates. And this wasn't something that the commission perhaps thought about when it was designed, but certainly upon us now. I mean, for example, the Scala Fisheries, the stock assessment working group that's doing their 3-year review, they are not going to meet their terms of reference. They're not going to meet. And I think we need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with these different uncertain estimates that are coming in. The uncertainty is probably going to increase. Surveys are going to be canceled. And also with the Chevron deference, we are also able to have alternative research presented and considered in a way that it hasn't been before, like collaborative research. So again, that might be something to, this commission could think about.
And I think, yeah. Okay, so I got what I was gonna say now. And it goes back to getting young people in this business. Back in the day, when young people got in, people like myself, when I got into business, you were part of a group, kind of figuring that you were going to be a boat owner and operator at one point. That's largely probably right now almost impossible, from just the cost of buying a boat, cost of buying permits, tying, all the things we've talked about right now. So, you know, that's kind of a big problem. You're really only, you know, what has kept people in this business over 40 years is the fact that they were owner operators and not just an employee someplace.
Okay, so I think we got a good number of things. We're gonna come back as we close to get on here. So we will give you out individually for you to reach out and kind of gather some information out for folks, your constituencies, what they care about. And we have some work to do with story. We'll talk about Imdar about potentially coming in and figuring that out as well. Okay, let's go to offshore wind next. So a few things to note. Some people have asked kind of, you know, what is the status of offshore wind right now? So I think there's a lot in flux. I think the state's not quite prepared to answer because there's so much we don't know. So I will go out on the fly. And then you can, you know, push me off or change on my feet or whatever. So I think, you know, what I'm hearing from different folks that I talk to about this is it's interesting. So longer term leases that are primarily floating, for instance, like so in California, which they weren't planning to develop for 5 or 6 years anyway. They're continuing a state process to develop guidelines for actually fisheries compensation, a bunch of other things. The state got in kind of early, given that happened later in kind of a world which we developed in the US. So those developers and the fishermen are still going, doing their thing. It's partly think the development horizon for them is for 5 or 10 years out. We have not gotten word for the Gulf of Maine. There were leases let. There are requirements for submitting communications plans for fisheries, tribes, and somebody else. And we have not gotten any sense of whether those timelines are going to be met. They have to be met. We're going to try and find out. We'll let folks know on that. So that's where the kind of longer term plan for both Maine and floating. We just don't know. You know, there were a number of projects in various stages of post lease. They have a lease, but they're for various stages of permitting, right? So I believe there are 6 projects that have all their permits. And that would include, you know, obviously Vineyard Wind 1. Early on was the one. South Fork, thank you. Red Wind, Sunrise, and Empire One in the Bight, and then Seavow, which is the Dominion project off of Virginia, right? The Atlantic Shores thought they had all their permits off of New Jersey, also heavily contested by both the Republican congressional delegation in New Jersey as well as many coastal communities there. Anyway, and essentially the permit there was within what's called the Environmental Appeal Board for EPA, and essentially EPA said we're not going to defend it, and that's perfectly legal to do. They did so, and EPA said, okay, well we have nothing to act on, so there we go. So the permit was in appeal, and then they yanked it when it was in appeal. So it's no one knows what the status of that means, but that's probably not looking great for that project. But you know, I can't speak to investors and where they're heading. So the 6 that are fully permitted, some of which are moving forward with construction like as we speak, the general understanding is those are likely to continue. I say likely because we don't know, right? The message generally from second or third hand from Interior is that the Interior is kind of protecting those 6 to continue, but planning to do no extensive planning beyond that administration. However, some people are saying across within fisheries and other places, this is a good time to kind of pause, let those go forward, learn what we can from them, and let's talk about if this does pick up again at some future point, how we can all. So there's potentially an opportunity here around the pause and thinking about how to do this all better together. So that's what I know. I could be completely wrong, and but just sharing with you what I know. All right. So with that in mind, I think what we saw here in terms of this is like, you know, is I think first, you know, it's again, there's a lot of the horse race is close, but this idea of improving the role of fishing in the state's processes for offshore wind is pretty strong. So I'm curious how we could start thinking that through. These of us here. I think curious what you all think. I mean, again, the fisheries working group is very focused on projects and the day-to-day and stuff. I think this is trying to pull up a broader perspective than it could be appropriate. So.
Quick question. We have, and you're still involved with now, have RFA.
Yeah.
I mean, would that be just doubling the work for developing? Where did I see it? It's for,
Mitigation.
it was, yep, okay. So, yep. For mitigating, no, I thought I saw some financial.
The managed funds.
Okay, yes, sorry.
And those are
So
those are the funds that already got negotiated.
These
Dan's
are the
sitting on
already-
several of them.
okay, all right.
Yeah, the regional fund administrator is continuing. It's a state-led effort funded by offshore wind developers, states and foundations. It's got a department, a design oversight committee of fishermen, and Katie helped, they pays.
Yeah, I'm not involved anymore.
So Brad is.
Rats, yes. One Katie.
I voted for Keith.
Okay, so, curious, yeah.
So the second bullet,
Yeah.
I'm gonna read Ed's mind right now, and I think when the final language came out on the CCM documents, I don't think that there was a fishing industry representative that actually scrutinized that, because, maybe that could have helped, if not into the magnitude of the mitigation, but maybe some of the details, so is that accurate?
I can't speak to the accuracy of that at all, but I will say this, that I think everyone who's participated in the offshore wind discussion since Cape Wind, pretty much has come to the conclusion now that they're pretty well powerless in any decision process that's happened over offshore wind. And probably been in the offshore wind discussion as long as anyone has. And to me, right now, I think the only thing we can have any sort of say on is mitigation. And I think we've largely been left out of that. The mitigation, vineyard wind mitigation is extremely minimal and doesn't even come close to addressing some of the larger issues that we've talked about at fishing industry has come up with as comments in regards to it. It has to be a broad interpretation of what may happen to the whole ecosystem and to other issues such as vessel displacement, changes in physical oceanography, yada, yada, yada. And so when Vineyard Wind comes out and says, you have to prove that you were actually right here, that we're pounding this pipe and have a loss because of it, that I think is extremely minimal. And so I think what we need are political people. The state of Massachusetts is to, and I think this group would be a good conduit for that, would be to say that the mitigation we need a lot, we need more. I tell people this all the time. We're holding all the risk for offshore wind. That is because of the Sustainable Fisheries Act. That's how the Sustainable Fisheries Act is written. If there is a negative impact, fish stocks, it's up to the fishing industry to fix it. It becomes, and that's the law. So for us, to be offered pennies is an insult. And so I think that this commission, I think it should be one of the consensus items that this commission comes up with is that the mitigation so far has not been up to snuff.
So, I just want to expand a little bit on the mitigation issue. And Dan, you may recall, during the Romney administration, the whole notion of wind farms came up again. And there was a study, I think the ANF did a study, and they came back and said, well, X amount of money, was gonna go for the wind farms to put them up. But the suggestion was that they have an equal amount of money to dismantle the wind farms when they become obsolete. And the wind farms at that point were not willing to do that, and Mommy said, well, forget it, we're not gonna go forward on it. And now a lot of these things have gone forward. And I don't know, maybe this body can have input in terms of expanding the mitigation. So that if wind farms are really serious, to Ed's point, it should not come back onto the industry itself. It should go on those people that are putting up the wind farms to have that money in escrow, should it be needed. And to the extent that they don't, then they're not serious about it, because the state's gonna end up paying for it anyway if they don't. And the fishermen are gonna pay for it by the disruption to the harvest.
And I'll jump on Eddie and Roger's comments. I think mitigation needs to be looked at the construction and the decommissioning level. Having started with the MLA 18 years ago, I came in when the LNG hub lines, we talked about this last week, Al. The LNG hub lines were being installed and mitigation monies were on the table, and now they're being decommissioned, the Neptune one. To show an economic footprint, like Eddie said, is extremely hard. Mobile gear has a little bit better ability to. The lobster industry has almost zero ability, and having worked with a lot of lobstermen in southern New England to get those claim forms filled out and articulated so that they can show, I mean, they're given log books, they're given chart plotters. So maybe the state can help craft form or a format to help
Guidelines.
articulate that. And then the decommissioning component, these funds are for 30 years. So to Eddie's point, $19 million for 30 years is not a lot of money when you look at it over time.
Yeah, there was a time when it was first starting that the fishing industry did have a lot more say in it. I mean, when the original lease for the Massachusetts area, when I was on the working group that the mayor of New Bedford organized, and it was our recommendations that it be cut in half based on fishing grants. So I don't know where that power kind of started to lose. I suspect it was the transit routes when the transit routes they were having space between the areas. Somehow or another, it needs, you need to get that back. You need to have that voice heard better. And the for the mitigation, like you're saying, and the ecological studies showing the impact are just at very, very low. As you know, we're working on some of them. They're just at the very brink of starting to happen. So it's, it seems, it's early for mitigation. You don't know the environmental impact of it. Some of the models are now just kicking in or showing quite substantial change and group changes. But it's got to work through it's got to get published, so it's becomes best to be able to solve.
Harry.
Yeah, I think the state has a lot of power, the procurement part of it. Power purchase agreements are negotiated by the state. There could be guidelines put in to fund mitigation. And mitigation has to be a lot more than just during construction and decommissioning. There are long-term effects, there's cumulative effects, but we don't know yet. And we can use this pause to study some of those. Maybe some of the short-term effects that we see from construction and the acoustic surveys. Maybe they'll mitigate themselves. We don't know. But have to have money set aside to offset that. And the state has a lot of power when they negotiate the power purchase agreements. They can have set aside money as a requisite for those agreements.
And just to follow up on the comment about fishing footprint, I'm happy to say we are finally having our first meeting in a couple of weeks. We have this logbook, this electronic logbook, real-time data that the fishermen are going to get, and it's going to put down hopefully it's honest reporting, catch what they catch in a trawl so that they can articulate the aggregated data and economic fishing footprint. So I'll keep you posted on that.
You know, the state, again, as I said, through the Green Communities Act, negotiates these power purchase agreements. And it's very telling that some of the wind companies paid as much as $40 million to get out of some of these contracts. So the idea that there is, if you're paying $40 million to get out of this contract, and let's face it, Avangrid, Iberdrola, these are some of the largest energy companies in the world. They have plenty of money, and really the state legislators need to, and the executive office needs to really put the foot down and to negotiate. I think it's a critical point. Go back originally with Vineyard Wind and Rhode Island. I mean, Katie can probably talk about Rhode Island, how difficult it was to get $5 million. I think it was a final. I don't even know if that was the number. But again, I think if this group can really impress upon the legislature the need to stand strong on mitigation, because I think that's the only thing we have.
I'm gonna go to Dan, Beth, and then Gordon, I'm gonna just throw you in.
So there's at least 5 or 6 folks at this table who will also participate in the offshore fisheries, offshore working group, fisheries working group on offshore wind. So we have to think, okay, what part of this conversation is best developed here? Whereas, or do we learn something at the fisheries working group and then come in here and make some statements? So the relationship between these two groups is a critical question.
I agree. I think it needs to be a higher, take everything from the fisheries working group and bring it up to the next level. And, you know, I explained to our members, if you look at Southern New England, it's 1,400 square miles of subdivisions. Each developer is going to build a subdivision. And just because the subdivision is in your backyard doesn't mean that that power is not coming to your state. And those developers don't have to talk to your state pretty much. So how can we bridge that? Because they're gonna be impacted in Massachusetts and Southern England. That's a real concern.
Yeah, a couple things. I think the full name is the Offshore Wind Technical Working Group, right? No?
There's many.
Oh, it's the.
I think it's close, I mean.
My point is that work has to go somewhere, and I think, Dan, to your question, how they're gonna work together. This could be the body that takes that and runs with it, right, on the work that, the outcome of the working group. On the mitigation front, which, you know, we're exhausted from screaming that in New Bedford. Much of those mitigation funds were based on economic analyses paid for by the developers, right? And, you know, they hired Hui, which gave them sort of credibility. Katie, how many times were we on these calls, right? But they were Hui economists, right? And they were not fisheries biologists. There was no conversation with commercial fishermen about it. And our point always was, and it is, what if you're wrong, right? Like, if you're right, fine. But if we agree to this now and we find out 5 or 10 years from now, there is no recourse, right? There needs to be some triggering mechanism down the road when we do have the research and we do have the analysis on, you know, that there is more triggering. I just think it was of a piece that what we were trying to do was get the renewable power, right? And then you had European developers saying, we're going to give this to you. And there was very little pushback on the developers and what they were claiming to do, because we wanted to get the projects in the ground. I think the pause does give us that opportunity to say, okay, what does an offshore wind industry look like in the United States, which is going to be very different than what it looked like in Europe. And how do we do it now? I agree the mitigation needs to be a priority, but the avoidance and minimization, I think we cannot give in on that yet. I think we need to look at whether it's revisiting the wind energy areas themselves and, how they were identified, or other ways, we gotta bring avoidance and minimization back to the top of the conversation as much as mitigation. I think that's the opportunity in the box.
I want to agree with everything you just said, except for one word, outcome. My sense is that when we have the fisheries, offshore wind fisheries working group.
I think it's Fisheries Working Group on offshore.
Thank you. There really aren't outcomes. I mean, they're excellent sharing of information, there's excellent conversation, but there's outcome might be to plan another conversation, but I think maybe the outcome can be a meeting held 2 or 3 weeks later here, where this group can talk about what they heard, and if they wanna write letters about it, if they wanna make recommendations to state government about it, I think that's probably the way.
So,
Dan, do you want to clarify what kind of outcomes you're thinking of? Because I think there have been substantial outcomes to the group. They might be at a different level than your.
Well, for example, the bold policy
Yeah.
is an outcome, but it's not necessarily an outcome like approved by the large group. The large group sort of gives input, and certainly Todd and company have done a great job developing that policy, and then bring it here and let this commercial gang really chew on it and really make their opinions known about that. Like, what is the way to avoid that older mess? You know, we're identifying the problem, but there isn't like a wheelhouse policy. Like, how does the developer prevent that contractor from putting the boulder? I mean, that's something these folks are working on that this group could probably weigh in on, saying, hey, great job.
Can I throw a few ideas, then I'll go to the hands around? So I think at the fisheries group level, I think even though it's not technical, that's not a bad distinction, right? It's essentially, it's in the weeds, doing that, it raises an issue like bouldering, it's a technical issue, staff can take it and develop policy and guidance, get feedback on it, we're guiding it forward, right? I do think on the mitigation one, if this group and if CZM, so I'm going to turn Allison to you, if this group wanted to think about how you could do the mitigation conversations better and differently when they happen, if and when they happen in the future, right? Then that could be a conversation I think you all could have to give advice about when fishermen involved, how they're involved, how to think about these WUI studies and could they be better or different. Some of this does bleed also into the regional fund administrator, which is trying to do some of this, so we can sort all that out. So you could do that if you wanted to. I think on Gordon's point about, what's the minimization, the question is like, what else is gonna, are those leases gonna sit there for 5 years and get reinstated again and just up and running again? A lot, BOEM, I think, learned, and we work for them sometimes, so Jackie should just weigh in on this one, and other folks in Gloucester, on the offshore wind stuff on the Gulf of Maine, BOEM, I think, did a better job of engagement during the planning process, better modeling, but it took them, 10 projects to get back, right? So I think we could talk about avoidance and minimization, because I think there's been a few examples where people have tried to do a better job, either in the planning or in the array design, and part one being the only one that tried to adjust its array design specifically for fishing. The challenge with the Southern England area, if it stays, is the agreement across developers was the 1-by-1 layout in a certain direction, so there's not, right now, there's not a lot of room to play with the subdivisions, as Beth, I think, you described.
I would, if I had my way, I would love to see maybe the chairman of the department, state rep, Jeffrey Roy, who chairs the Utilities Commission, and maybe his Senate counterpart, and we could invite him here, because I don't think either one of those two have heard firsthand anything from the fishing industry. To tell you the truth, I don't think maybe I'm wrong, but have they ever been in a fishing working group? I don't think so. And I think certainly Jeffrey Roy's been at the forefront of the negotiation.
And I didn't mention PPAs, which I should, because that could be, states have been loath to use as leverage around mitigation monies. They have in New York and New Jersey, they did use it for research monies. So so much money per megawatt goes to research. Jackie, and then their quarter.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, with quickly, of course, if something comes up in the working group, fisheries, working group meeting, whatever they're called.
You know what we're talking about.
If something comes up at one of those meetings and you feel as the director of the, that you need to have this group weigh in on something, I think, of course, like under a meeting that we would have, we would definitely help you and work with your team to answer questions, but I just don't want this group to be focused on that level of, I would hate to find that we're focused on the Boulder issue when we should be focused on transmission line, procurement process, policies that are bigger issues for the fishing industry where we don't have current seats at the table. So, or people don't really understand fishing or aren't really putting clean energy and offshore wind and fishing together. So I would want to focus on those larger policy issues rather than the smaller issues of boulders. And I told Pat, I was gonna bring a rock today if the boulders came up and I was gonna move it around the table, but I didn't bring a rock.
So, I mean, I appreciate that, but I
That you did bring the rock or that.
It's like a glass house.
I think you're looking at the glass as half full, and I'm looking at it as half empty, or vice versa, because
There's water in the glass.
there's definitely one of the glass, and maybe Brad and Todd can weigh in on this, because I see great progress being made on some of those, the minutia of the Boulder issues. But I have yet to get consensus from a group of commercial fishing interests saying, yes, we're all in on this, keep doing this. Maybe people are having one-on-one conversations with Todd, and that's great, but like, we're really making progress on that. It'd be great to have somebody say, and this is important, and we love these details and keep going. That's what I mean by outcomes. I mean, there's incremental, progress great progress being made by Todd and Holly on this. I'm just saying that when is this group of commercial fishing interests endorsed it? I mean, you sit there with the fisheries working group on Zoom and they're great meetings, they're informative, but when did you say, yes, this is what we need, and hey, developer, or hey, state government, you need a stronger policy on where these boulders are putting, because if you listen to Fred Matera and we agree with them, this is gonna be a real problem. So anyway,
But
that's what I'm getting.
The issue is at a federal, that's a BOEM issue. I mean, don't they have permits where they're not able to, like, didn't they, like, construction plans and permits that they have to adhere to?
This is
That,
a flawed.
like, who's enforcing that? I mean, that's not your responsibility, like, it's, well, I mean, then we write a letter.
By design.
But design.
I mean, I would say, again,
It's by design and.
a few things to note. Again, there is the Boulder relocation plan, which is submitted to BOEM for approval. There's certain very broad BOEM guidance, including even the size of the boulder, which most people don't even agree with. And I think the state stepped in because BOEM's guidance was so poor, frankly, on the boulder.
I don't think they expected, they didn't
Yeah, I don't think, and the good thing is the fishermen first said, what, right? And that's when this got, but I think to Jackie's point, he certainly could be endorsed and supported. It's not like you guys are gonna develop, right? And he is-
No, right.
Right, if you work on something, you wanna bring it to the group, that totally makes sense to give that feedback and use this group for that, but I just, with that, I think that's like the key.
I agree with Jackie. I don't want to see this become a 2.0 fisheries working group,
Yeah.
but taking the higher levels. I think that's great, so we can have an outcome and an action, and we'll take all the boulders, so just tell us where they are. And all and we'll them for you. Just put them right in one spot, put it on the chart, and they'll do good.
So I think to move this,
Just in terms of, can we, what if we just quickly ask if people want to total comment?
I have a quick
And then we
comment.
have another
Let me
section.
close this one over. So I would suggest that if Allison and Dan are designee and 2 or 3 of you at most, let's kind of sit down and try to carve out given this conversation, what the commission could work on in terms of offshore wind at a higher level, right? I think we're gonna need a little more kind of gelling time. So in fact, on that one particular, I don't want the group too big, but 2 or 3 people just to gel what it is, and we'll bring back to the commission, here's what we think we should do on offshore wind, right? So it's a draft that then we bring back forward. We'll follow the rules. We don't have too many folks on it because we've got like some state rules we have to do. But is there 2 or 3 people who would be willing to sit down with the 2 entities here and have that conversation? Katie?
We never get out of it.
Somebody from the
In two
board. of
thousand nine, I said, I'm never gonna.
Gordon?
That was 2000, I was
So
never
on
gonna
this
comment on
specific
an offshore wind
topic,
project.
Yeah,
I
yes,
will.
Jackie?
So could
Don't
we,
make me
can we agree that this is it's a refined definition or visioning of how the fisheries working group on offshore wind and this group sort of interact or
so.
parse the issue?
Parts issues, there we go. I think parts issues maybe is good. What's in the bailiwick of the fisheries working
Because the
group?
reason we haven't met for a year and a half is because we couldn't figure this out. To be honest, I mean, we
Right,
read
well,
this.
I think it's awesome. There's so many groups that you don't wanna overlap. you
Right.
don't- But I mean, I really I don't even understand the whole background of that group. I feel like it's just been, and now everyone gets invited to it. I don't know who's officially a member or not. I know it started for one purpose with, which is great. There was no, Vineyard Wind was coming in and everyone was trying to figure out how this was gonna work. And a group of folks were nominated to be part of a fisheries advisory group. I'm not on that
I
group.
don't think I don't even think that's how it even
No,
happened,
it
Jack.
just started.
It
out.
just started, and I can remember the first time it ever happened, it was still, it was Jim Gordon,
Yeah,
and I think that was maybe 2010,
yeah,
maybe, and then it went like into the air.
yeah.
But it's really evolved.
I'll have to say, I've never been a fan of the fisheries working. And I
And
think,
it's just more collaborative, like what are we doing, what are you doing, I feel like it.
Right.
it never had a decision process
So
to
why
it.
don't we do this, so then just for the time, so I think, again, there is a long history. So I think if, Gordon, if you're willing, I believe your colleague wanted to make a brief comment on this, is that?
Yeah, we'll just have,
Brains behind.
one comment. I think it'll be beneficial if you get all the committees and commissions together, joint group, maybe have a one-day fisheries summit. Go over the roles and expectations of each committee. And then as a group, all these committees are talking about the same. So it's important that we break it up and get more work done. And then in the end, if we do end up writing letters, and support and stuff, it could be 7 different committees, if we all agree on certain. So one day event, bring everyone together, a lot of people on the same committees. Work out the exact roles and responsibilities.
I think you should do one of those nice Venn diagrams so you can see where the overlap is and hopefully consolidate some of it.
So we can work on that with staff, hopefully. And maybe try to do a little bit, other than just like having a laundry list. Yeah. So I think I've got Ed, Katie, Gordon and Jackie to kind of sit down with CZM and DMF and us and try to sort out a little bit how we can frame up the offshore wind way, in a way that it can synergizes with the fisheries working group, that also separates kind of clear scope, that's a higher level. We've definitely heard things about mitigation from essentially construction to decommissioning, and we've also heard some about, can we do something upstream in terms of the avoidance and mitigation? So
Was the fisheries working group legislated? Was it, it's
it's
just
a creation
creation
of CZ
ad hoc.
and DMF.
And just
Within an intersect.
Subcommittee group, I'm happy to do the public one.
Okay, let's actually do that right now, then I know we do public comment. For the folks who want to sit down with Story and sort through the beginnings of what we're gonna think about ports and all that piece, who wants to do that?
I'll do
Beth? Aubrey? Ed? Do 2 or 1? Do you have time?
No.
Pick one. Okay. Anybody else on ports? I mean, Gordon, we could, if you don't want to do the offshore wind one, or you want to do the ports one too, or you can, potentially, we can have a staff person support you from your end.
Yeah, and we're a resource for the port profile,
Yeah, I think we
It
would.
doesn't need to be on the committee, but I'm happy to, chat a story, review it, all that kind of stuff. This is clear, this is important stuff, so if I need to do both, I have it.
Okay. All right, and you don't have to join a small group if you don't want to, and if you do, please do.
So there's still one.
Yeah, so what I was thinking was, do we want to take a quick public comment if there is any?
Can we just raise your hand if you want to give a public comment, so you know how much time to leave at the end? Anybody? This is for.
I know,
for
true.
people
There's, if there's any staff from legislators that want to make any comments, absolutely.
Okay, great. So what did Pat, we did like 7 minutes on this and then transition to our next.
Yep, exactly. So I think the two that came out the strongest were making sure that, commercial fisheries and for hire is really incorporated into state plans and the like. So that may be, I don't know, Allison and Dan, whether it's like thinking about all the various plans that I'm thinking particularly under EDA have been produced or are being produced and how we potentially then, I don't know, do a little review I don't know how we would do that, but I think it's a worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean. Want to defer to all of you how you think this would best work, but you can certainly see a way in which, say, for example, the resilient coast plan, right? Instead of asking all your entities to participate in 17 parallel planning processes, how do we potentially use this group as a point to bring plans to this group and get some consolidated, coordinated feedback is one model. There might be others. But there, I pulled up 17, but there are a lot of planning processes happening in parallel, probably not that many.
But it feels like 17.
Yeah, it might feel that way.
Yeah. Dan, if you have any.
But I don't know if there are other things you were thinking about there.
I mean, there's the coastal resilience
Yeah,
plan.
Todd?
The ocean plan also.
Yeah.
So
That's one of the 17.
in Dan's team, Mike and Dean is the one who's gonna be heading up the recreation of all those maps that I showed you about commercial fishing effort and value, where the vessels go, what fish resource areas. And so we had the first meeting of that group, but anyone here could potentially comment on the methodology or even just ground truth the map with your knowledge that, yeah, this makes sense.
Maybe one thing this group could
Can
use
we
for
bring back Darren Babrod? Darren.
Darren Babrod.
Yeah, he was the original ocean.
Two no to no.
I know.
Two no,
Ed,
but-
Ed, you and I both. Yeah. I mean, another possibility too, is, what was I gonna say, is that, all right, we could, this group could be a place where, again, we bring potentially draft plans that have impact fisheries.
And bring feedback.
Get feedback. It's also possible that if we kind of know the various planning things going on that might be related to fisheries, so we can just let you know that
Yeah,
coastal resilience is having 3 public meetings or whatever. Seems like that would be useful.
could go that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
easiest.
Aubrey had a comment.
Yeah, Aubrey, sorry.
Oh, I was wasn't sure with some of the maps, they seem very valuable. Is there a way that this group could be elevating that in terms of like instituting another policy that it needs to have this type of, analysis done before fish lines or other, I don't know if that's something that we could, as a group, elevate.
I mean, honestly, one of the questions I have as a person for the state who reviews offshore projects through the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act is, how should I be using these? So I'm a biologist, I know how to work at in the habitat side, but I'm not exactly sure what to say to the Secretary of Environmental Affairs about a cable that's going through concentrated fishing areas. Like, what is it that you guys want from us to do about that? Right, so right now what we do is we ask for the person on board who reattaches the buoys that get cut. We talk about, notices to mariners, but I don't know, what else could be done?
Yeah.
What is it that we can do?
I think it's just really valuable. There might be a way that we could brainstorm some ideas.
Thank you.
Well, back in the day when they were doing that, ocean, whatever it was, 2008.
2008.
And again, we met with Darren Babrod. Marshville Commercial Fishermen's Association felt that state weren't getting the right information. We met with him and I think he had a totally different outlook as to what where fishing effort is happening. So I think that's what we need to do right now, because I found those charts extremely lacking in
Update.
So before any quality decisions get made, I think you need to do that outreach. At least so that everyone who's in this fishing industry has a feels that it's a credible source of information.
Todd, when is the update happening next year?
Well, we're in the review process right now, and so that review process will create a document that says, here are the recommendations moving forward. And so I said, like, the fisheries working group working on those maps is going through the methodologies and the data. Maps are only as good as the data, right? So if you're invested in that data, it makes a good map.
But to answer, we are
We're in the
just
process.
beginning the outreach process to stand up those committees, so you've not missed any part of it yet, and we'll be getting
We
outreach.
hope to have a draft review document by June this year, August. August.
How about fall?
I agree with that, it's showed where the traffic's going through the canal and going out.
Right.
And I know Plymouth has 45, 48 commercial lux boats and it didn't even have a one yellow line, so.
Because you don't have data.
Marsh, yeah, situate, there's about 100 boats.
They have AIS?
Yeah, but
They don't have, and that's,
That,
yeah.
that's not talking.
But that's, what, so what, you don't have AIS, you're not.
No,
you're
the
not-
data set that he
conversation.
displayed was
That's right.
AIS festival.
Exactly.
That's how you interpret it.
Well, that's why I need to do the outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think so on that one, I think we've got some, again, we can bring stuff here, we can share you stuff that's happening elsewhere, so you can go there. We may want to look at plans that are kind of in draft phase that we could bring sooner rather than later here as well. So we'll think about that. Coastal Resilience is one. Biodiversity is close to finish, but it may be worth thinking about that one too, and maybe others. And then lastly, I'm not sure what to do this one because it seems like hard and also without our bandwidth, but it's just improving science of fisheries management and encouraging collaboration. So obviously really important. And probably what Kevin brought up. What could be the role of this group in that topic?
Well, I think that you get a whole bunch of, you get things in flux with it, and that you're going to have more limited scientific data. It's going to be becoming slower. You're going to have, so the management decision is going to be offset by the timing and delays and the limited information.
And more conservative because of that, right?
Yes, yeah, every time there's uncertainty, fishing industry pays for it through a lower, through the conservation measures. And so I think that thinking about that, and so maybe you want, and maybe, you know, I don't know, Eric's on the council, maybe get Kate in to talk about this, or how we can, as a state, start to influence things so that we're not paying that cost, or we're not, you know, we're able to either get the information out there, because there is alternative information that just hasn't been included. Just to start thinking about how to address this, because it's going to come fast, I think. You were talking about the scallop fishery. You mentioned the scallop fishery. If you look at the situation of the scallop fishery now, there's been about a 70% reduction in biomass. It's huge amount of reduction. However, if you look at the numbers of scallops, there's actually on George's Bank last year, there was 7 million scallops. Now there's 17 million. So there's huge recruitment, but you've got all this effort and you've got no way to disperse the effort or to close areas to let it grow, which is supposed to be the rotation thing. So how do you deal with that? You open the HAPC, council took that off the discussion before the scientific review was even done. Those kind of things, you're gonna have to start to think carefully about, because otherwise you're gonna lose these fisheries. Same with the cod. There's shifts in cod, there's movement in the way it's going, but there's also, I mean, our survey saw more cod than what the Marine Fisheries Service were. Why isn't that data being considered and addressed? This commission has the power to start pushing some of those different alternative ideas forward and putting the pressure on to think about different fisheries management strategies. How do you do that rotational fishing? How do you do the mitigation? That's I'm starting to ramp here. That's what I'm stating.
I get Roger and then Dan and then Aubrey, and then we might begin to close this.
So the science of fisheries management that exists in Massachusetts today, it's kind of an oxymoron. In that, it keeps getting more and more primitive. I had the opportunity over the last several years to sit on Mayfac, NOAA, and the distribution of science. There's some really good science out there, but it's taking place on the West Coast. They have things like sail drones that do incredible surveys. And, right now in Massachusetts, it seems like we're going over the same beds where the fish have moved as a result of global warming. And then we default to what what the most conservative is. So we're going backwards. So one of the things I think that this group can do is potentially reach out to NOAA. And there's some Massachusetts people, on fisheries at NOAA in Washington, we can reach out to try to get some of this science, better science out there for doing stock assessments. And what I've seen over different parts of the country, it's really a relationship business. If you develop a good relationship, they're going to keep throwing you more and more resources your way. But there seems to be a little bit of a detente between Massachusetts Fisheries and NOAA right now. I think that one of the things that we can do is kind of bridge the gap and get more science and work in better.
Yeah, just really quick, I know you had mentioned about kind of the state of where we are with offshore wind, and I feel like with the kind of slow or delay, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, the offshore wind, I feel like this presents an opportunity for the commission here to really think about baseline studies, environmental studies, what needs to be done, especially for that needs, because 2 years of baseline data, we all know it's not good enough. So I think there's opportunities to kind of maybe be pushing more collaborative research or working with universities or other institutions now. We have the time, if we're also thinking about how this commission can work with offshore wind or coexistence with something.
Just want to throw in one point, which is talking about science, to build off of what Roger was saying, the legislature passed a bill last year that requires us, the state, to look at environmental DNA and how it might interact with this ocean management plan I was talking about. So I'd like to throw that out to all of you in your industries. Dan's got staff members on his team, partner with Gloucester Marine Genomics Institute and UMass Amherst to do eDNA, which basically you filter the water, look at all the DNA that's in there, and you can see what animals have shed DNA into that part of water. So think about if that's something that might be useful to your industry. See, that's something we can integrate.
Dan, do you have a?
Yeah, to follow up on Kevin Stokesbury's point about the loss of surveys, maybe we should consider one of the products of this group is lobbying, like writing letters. We can develop a letterhead with all of your names on the left-hand column to show, the prominence of the individual members, and then start, firing letters to Congress and administration. We're gonna need the studies, we're gonna need the data collection. And to your point, if we're gonna have less of that, we're gonna have less accurate assessments and be more conservative.
And a lot of the surveys obviously are in federal waters, so if we're gonna focus in state, partner with the Science Center for federal waters, that would be great.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of uncertainty that's come from our assessments has been the aging of fish. Because there's been no port side sampling or a huge reduction in port side sampling. And the state's done, are just kind of getting it off the ground, and there aren't that many boats that are operating. The state's been amazing at working with the industry to start getting samples now for stocks that are not being sampled because the sampling program basically stopped. I mean, it was a huge problem in our models, the assumption of the aging. And we have age-based model, and we have limited data on aging. I mean, they had to borrow Canadian age data for George's Bank cod. I mean, come on. I mean, in last summer in our assessments. I mean, it's not just the surveys. We've got some real problems, and the state's been great at trying to, supplement what the federal government can't do, that they can do with the docks. And so there's a lot of opportunities there that are, thinking outside of the science realm.
So, final word on this, I thought maybe it's next step.
I'm gonna say something because I think Kevin's, probably doesn't want to say it, but Kevin has some great cod surveys that have been going on for, now 12 years, 14 years. And no one refuses to accept it. And that to me, I just, it's a bias that it's almost unexplainable. And I think the only way we get to that point. So here it is. We're talking about having alternate signs. We have alternate signs. We just got to get someone to, what is it? Is it like a little pissing contest amongst bureaucracies that they don't want to send it? Or is it, so I think we need to get, and it would probably be great if it had a whole New England congressional contingent to say, we have good science, look at it and use it.
So on that, just to give Dr. Stokesbury a little pat on the back too. I mean, he wrote a letter based on the video, open cod and video trawl survey, the work that he's been doing that Ed was talking about. He got the data together over the last few years, put it together and found that, the biomass were based on his video survey in a very limited period of time. If extrapolated out, showed that the Western Gulf Maine cod stock scale was way off. He submitted a letter to the council's scientific and statistical committee last May, just to show, not to say my numbers are better than yours, but just to say there's some scaling issues here, and your model is not producing reliable results, and you need to dig a little deeper, and it got completely ignored.
So what I would suggest, not to that said, no, but let me suggest.
And that's something that we could, get behind as a group, and again, this is like, I feel like it's I don't want us to get caught up in the minutia of some of these individual projects, but I do feel like we can be a very powerful group if we're all working together and trying to help amplify some important fishing industry issues that come up.
Kevin, can you share with the commission just some video bites to show, because if people haven't seen your video,
Sure.
that would be great.
Yeah, but YouTube.
All right. YouTube, sorry.
Kevin's an influence. You'll have to ignore all the ads, but other than that. Okay, so I think the next about this, Dan, I think what it is folks who are interested, we won't even worry about exact group, and get together with Dan and staff, and we can have a conversation about these issues and see if we can't formulate, whether it's a letter, we support Kevin's, whatever. I think let's get together and kind of talk this through and figure out what the step might be. I want to just very few logistics as we close. We've got a number of action items that I think we can, Abby, I have some, maybe you can go through too. Do we have any paperwork here we do? Okay, why don't we let you?
Sure, so, thank you. It's fine. Yeah, you got it before tonight, so this day work. I left with everyone 2 certificates for you to sign. One is with regards to the conflict of interest law that you received, the summary I sent a couple weeks back. Same with the open meeting law. We just complete those, and then I believe, yeah, you have changes to the contract info that I provided, send that to me. Otherwise, I'll finalize that matrix and send that around. And I think Kevin and Roger, there's also a Form O in front of you, which is your appointment form that you just need to sign. That formalizes your appointment to this public body.
And then next vision meeting, there are some housekeeping we did into around rules. We don't have we have a chart, not a charter, so we'll have something for you to look at more processing next time, along with some of the more other sort of processes that we may know on the state. Commissions are formal and certain rules. Okay, so Abby, do you want to take a crack at the action items? Do you want me to?
Yeah, mine are in a bit of a, we'll see what comes out of these. Okay, I think one is to put together a bit of a roster of people that we want to invite to these meetings to listen in, and I know we heard maybe adding MMA, mass development, And I think there were a few others, so we'll go back to our notes, so they're aware, and maybe even sometimes intentionally like them. DEP was one of them. We will share the port master plan that Beth, I think you had mentioned. Todd, you're gonna look into industry standards around burying cables, following up on that with Al, I think. We will send out maybe the information about the Resilient Coast Initiative. People there. Share the port strategic plan.
Right, from MassDOT.
We'll do that. We will put together maybe a simplified version of some of these questions into a survey if you want to go out and share those with some of your constituencies. Tim was gonna look into trainings for the fishing industry, so we know what's available. And then we will try to put together some small groups, one on the offshore wind work and how it's gonna overlap with the fisheries working group, and we have Jackie, Katie, Gordon, and Ed on that. Then we have a small group on port profiles, stories, so that will be Beth, Aubrey, and then Gordon might review that, and since you're gonna be involved other times. And then we didn't assign people, but it seems like there's gonna be some sort of small group on like this data question and surveys.
I think we'll invite you to a conversation, have the conversation, see what it makes sense to do.
So we'll invite everyone if you can come. We can't go over quorum, so we'll need to be careful.
Yeah, we have some rules, but we to like, if we have to do two separate ones, then it'll be just you.
And then we'll make some sort of letterhead for the group to easily be able to send letters. Kevin's gonna share his Confluencer videos. And you all will fill out those forms for Jared. And we will probably meet again in about 3 months, June, July, bringing back some of that small group work, think through the work plan for the next year or so. Talk through some more governance charter things and open meeting law presentation to make sure we're all on this. What did I miss? That's it.
Problem. Dan Alvin.
Just a big thank you. I think it was a great conversation today. Appreciate you all coming into Boston. Sure we'll be somewhere else for the next one. Never again.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I think we made a lot of great progress today in terms of defining what this group does. And I don't want anybody to leave to think that I don't think there was progress made by the Boulder Group and all the other work done, the Fisheries Working Group. I just always feel that I'd like to get a resounding yes from a group like this when we're on the right track and there's just a lot of silence, so.
Yes.
That's all, but thank you very much, and thanks to CBI for
Thank
putting
you.
together a great meeting here.
Thank you all, thanks all. Grab the paper, huh? I hope you get out of the city.
Yes, don't delay.
Go now.
Right.